Chapter 2988. Thank you for your help, Ice Emperor. They're just a bunch of clowns. There is no need for Ice Emperor to get involved. How about Ice Emperor help me guard this place? Yi Shiwen said slowly. In that case, I will see Martial Emperor's divine might. Ice Emperor did not insist after hearing Yi Shiwen's words. He just glanced at Yi Shiwen. This was the first time he saw Yi Shiwen since he became a Martial Emperor. This was also the first time the two Martial Emperors of this world met. This time, he was standing on Yi Shiwen's side. Although Yi Shiwen was tyrannical, he would not act recklessly. In a sense, these Martial Emperors were the guardians of order. The only difference was that the order they created was completely different. However, these people were different. They were the destroyers of order. This time, they could target Yi Shiwen. Next time, it might be Ice Emperor. After all, there had been such cases before. In the distant past, they targeted Emperor Qin. Wasn't that the best example? These people did not follow the rules. It was common for several of them to team up. If they succeeded, it would not be a good thing for both the myriad heavens and him. This was the main reason why he had crossed more than half of the myriad heavens to help. However, although he had agreed to help, he was still worried. Like the others, he did not have much confidence in Yi Shiwen. He was too old, unimaginably old. As a Martial Emperor, he could easily feel that Yi Shiwen's qi and blood had declined to an unimaginable degree. Now, he was just forcibly stabilizing it with a secret technique. He even doubted whether Yi Shiwen would be able to support himself in this battle. Bao Huang and the other two Martial Emperors' faces suddenly fell. Yi Shiwen's words were simply not putting them in his eyes. It would be fine if he was still at his peak. However, his qi and blood had declined. How could he be at his peak? It seems that you are really courting death. Ba Huang snorted and attacked first. Overlord's fist. His fist blasted out. The heaven and earth were torn apart. Everything was shaking violently. It was as if the sky was going to collapse on the spot. This punch was incomparably domineering. It was as if all the domineering power in the world had been gathered into this punch. Even the Ice Empress was shocked. Although these people had become sovereigns by relying on the opportunities of becoming sovereigns, their strength was relatively low, and their potential for growth was also on the low side. However, they had become sovereigns for many years after all. If they were to unleash their full strength, they would be much stronger than a sovereign emperor who had just become a sovereign emperor. He was even more worried that Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to withstand the joint attack of these three people. This punch had already blasted in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. A time enchantment rushed out of his body and completely surrounded him in it. Boom! The fist of the Overlord and the robe of time collided fiercely, instantly emitting millions upon millions of strands of divine light, like flowing mercury, spreading out in all directions. The entire universe trembled violently along with the spirit treasures of the universe. Countless Tao sounds rang out, as if one could hear the cries of countless living beings. Yi Shiwen's vitality soared to the sky, transforming into invincible fighting strength. Even if his vitality was already exhausted, it was still enough to contend against the Overlord. A surprised look flashed in the Overlord's eyes as his attack missed. He hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would be so strong. In fact, he was unbelievably strong. The timing of their appearance was also very clever. They had calculated that Yi Shiwen's vitality was indeed declining. They didn't know the reason, but it couldn't be fate. However, they hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would still be able to display such fighting strength even at this stage. One could imagine how terrifying he would be if he was at his peak state. Let's go together. He's already old. There's nothing to be afraid of. The Jade Emperor roared and directly attacked. Next to him, Bao Huang also attacked. Because of the Ice Empress, they wanted to finish this battle quickly. They mustn't give the Ice Empress a chance to intervene. Just the three of them would naturally be able to kill Yi Shiwen. However, there would be many variables if the Ice Empress were to join in. They didn't dare to underestimate the fighting strength of any emperor. In their current situation, they couldn't afford to underestimate the fighting strength of any emperor. As soon as the Jade Emperor attacked, the entire star field was filled with jade-colored energy. It seemed as if everything between heaven and earth was being controlled by him. It was extremely terrifying. The jade-colored energy spread throughout the entire divine court. It seemed as if everything in the divine court would be frozen. Fortunately, although the Ice Empress didn't attack, he was stabilizing the space. Even if his strength was the lowest among these emperors, he was only stabilizing the space. Otherwise, the aftermath of the battle would have destroyed the divine court. He could have easily taken up the task. However, the Ice Empress' face was somewhat dignified. The battle was already so intense at the beginning. One could imagine what would happen next. Although he had become an emperor, this was the first battle between emperors he had to face after becoming an emperor. On the other side, Bao Huang also shot out a treasure light which covered the entire sky. The shadows of these treasures formed an endless army and rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. After the Overlord was repelled by Yi Shiwen, he also rushed towards Yi Shiwen. He didn't give Yi Shiwen a chance to breathe. Let's go. We must exhaust him to death. He is already at the end of his rope. The Overlord's roar also represented the thoughts of the three. Yi Shiwen might be very strong, but he was already old and weak. The lack of blood essence was his biggest weakness. If the three of them joined forces, they would be able to exhaust him to death. Naturally, they were confident that they could defeat him. With just the three of you, you want to exhaust me to death? Yi Shiwen roared and punched out. The 6 paths of reincarnation suppressed the world. The 6 paths of reincarnation seemed to suppress all the attacks of the three. Boundless great Tao emanated from his body. He was invincible as he rushed up to the 9 heavens. So strong! Everyone was shocked. They were shocked by Yi Shiwen's strength. Was this still the appearance of someone who was on the verge of death? This was clearly a martial emperor who was still in his peak state. Yi Shiwen had suppressed the attacks of 3 people by himself. Such a degree of fierceness had even shocked the Ice Emperor. Yi Shiwen's strength had made people have a whole new level of respect for him, even though he was in his weakened state. One simply couldn't imagine how strong he would be if he wasn't in his weakened state. This was the supreme existence that ruled the world, the ultimate style of a martial emperor. Even if he had also stepped into the imperial emperor level, there seemed to be a big gap between him and a martial emperor. After suppressing the attacks of the three, Yi Shiwen's counterattack immediately came. A sword aura soared up to the sky, pierced through the sky, and smashed the galaxy. The Avicii sword suddenly slashed down. The sword energy of Yi Shiwen's slash almost caused the world to collapse and scatter. It seemed as if an endless number of gods had appeared, chanting ancient sword scriptures. Every word contained the great principles of Sword Tao. It was sacred and brilliant, suppressing all directions. Yi Shiwen's sword directly caused the 3 emperor monarchs' nomological laws to completely collapse, sever, and burn. So strong! The tyrant emperor suddenly felt an unimaginably strong pressure of becoming a martial emperor. His face froze. Fight him head on. I don't believe that his vitality can provide much combat power. The tyrant emperor, the treasure emperor, and the jade emperor joined forces and attacked with the power of the laws. It burned fiercely and turned into a terrible power. It rolled back and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Rumble! This collision made the heaven and earth wail. Even the Ice Emperor, who was maintaining the space from collapsing, felt a little strenuous. The law of ice crystals emerged on his body and formed an ice crystal armor to protect him. Just the aftermath of the battle made him feel a little threatened. So, he condensed the ice crystal armor to protect himself. Otherwise, if he was seriously injured by the aftermath of the battle, it would be really shameful. Yi Shiwen fought 1 against 3, but he didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. This made many people dumbfounded. What kind of combat power was this? He could actually fight 1 against 3 and fight equally. Although Yi Shiwen had killed a few imperial emperors before, it was all one-on-one battles. This time, he was fighting 1 against many, and he wasn't in peak condition. His vitality couldn't recover to its peak. A martial emperor has been invincible for many years. As expected, he is not an ordinary person. Yi Shiwen broke the joint attack of the three imperial emperors with one strike. His expression became colder and colder. I am a martial emperor. I should suppress all the jumping clowns in the world. You are just pawns that are used by others. All of you must die. Yi Shiwen's words rumbled, and the whole world trembled. Yi Shiwen was still so strong and unparalleled, as if he wasn't affected by the death chi that was getting denser and denser around him. Yi Shiwen, don't be too arrogant. Your vitality is not enough to suppress the death chi. Even if we don't kill you, you will soon be engulfed by the death chi. At that time, you will still die. You are already on the verge of death, and you still dare to be insolent in front of us. You are really courting death. Tyrant Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. His eyes were like torches, and he could see through everything. Naturally, he could see that from the battle until now, Yi Shiwen's vitality had been depleted a lot. It could be seen that such a battle did not have any effect on Yi Shiwen. On the contrary, it did have some effect on him. Tyrant Emperor's fist. Tyrant Emperor was incomparably overbearing. At this time, he was also overbearing. He took the lead and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. As for the other two, Bao Emperor and Jade Emperor, their speed was not slow either. They rushed towards Yi Shiwen on the spot to attack. The power of the three of them shook the heavens and the earth. It was as if it had been a long, long time since the three great emperors had joined forces to attack. Chapter 2989. That was because every emperor had their own pride. Under normal circumstances, they would not be besieged by so many people. That would also be a lack of confidence in themselves and a denial of themselves. If they wanted to continue on their path of cultivation, they needed to move forward courageously and have absolute confidence in themselves. However, it was clear that the three emperors had already given up on this idea. The only thing they wanted was to exhaust Yi Shiwen to death, seize his Dao tools, and seize his origin of the Great Path. This way, their strength could be improved. The three of them joined forces, and the power was terrifying. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid at all. Countless visions emerged behind him and formed an everlasting martial scripture. It floated around Yi Shiwen's body and formed a divine kingdom. He was the sole ruler of this divine kingdom. At this moment, he made his move. He punched out, causing the entire sky to tremble. His 6 paths of reincarnation fist headed straight for the Jade Emperor. The attacks of the other two fell on him and were absorbed by the robe of time. Bang! Yi Shiwen's punch directly blasted into the Jade Emperor's domain, smashing it into pieces. It collapsed in front of everyone on the spot, but Yi Shiwen's punch didn't lose momentum and directly blasted in front of the Jade Emperor. The Jade Emperor raised his hand to block, but there was only a loud bang. The Jade Emperor's entire arm exploded, breaking off inch by inch. Blood sprayed out like a downpour, spreading in all directions. Ah! The Jade Emperor screamed again and again. One should know that ordinary pain would not be able to move an Emperor-level expert. However, this attack still made him scream again and again. One could imagine how painful this attack was for him. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist that Yi Shiwen had blasted out was still rumbling. It was like a heaven-splitting lightning, opening up a new world and rearranging the order of the world. The Jade Emperor retreated again and again, madly using his spiritual power to expel the spiritual power that Yi Shiwen had blasted into his body. However, it was not that easy. He felt as if this punch had the characteristics of fire. Even his indestructible spirit began to burn. An unimaginable shock and fear flashed in his eyes. Yi Shiwen's punch had directly made him lose his combat effectiveness. He wouldn't be able to fight for a while. If this had been a one-on-one, face-to-face battle, then perhaps he would have been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen in one move. The only thing left would have been to prolong his life. How is this possible? How can he be so strong? He hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would still be able to erupt with such fighting prowess at this point. If he was at his peak, just thinking about that kind of scene actually made him feel a sense of fear. Such a person should not exist in this world. This reminded them of the time when they besieged the Qin Emperor. At that time, there were even more people besieging the Qin Emperor than now. In the end, only a few of them managed to escape. The rest were killed by the Qin Emperor. That battle was truly earth-shattering. The Qin Emperor had just become an emperor, but against these famous emperors, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Even though he was outnumbered, he still managed to kill a few of them. Although in that battle, the Qin Emperor was seriously injured and almost killed, but at the same time, he established the immortal prestige of the Qin Emperor. His fighting prowess was imprinted in everyone's hearts. Ba Huang and Bao Huang immediately reacted. Yi Shiwen intends to defeat them one by one. In one fell swoop, the Jade Emperor's fighting prowess was crippled. Now that there were only two of them left, wouldn't it be even easier for him to fight? Let's attack together. We can't let him have the opportunity to defeat us one by one. Ba Huang said coldly. That attack just now has consumed too much of his blood essence. I don't believe that he can continue to erupt with such attacks. As soon as Ba Huang's voice fell, everyone seemed to have just reacted. Looking at Yi Shiwen again, sure enough, his blood essence had weakened a lot. It was as if a large part of it had evaporated. If he was at his peak, this little bit of blood essence would have been completely restored in a few breaths' time. But now, most of Yi Shiwen's power was used to suppress the death energy. Otherwise, he would be corroded to death by the death energy. Therefore, there was no way for him to recover. Go, let's attack together. Ba Huang once again attacked. His overlord's fist suppressed the entire universe. All the brilliance disappeared. It was as if only his overlord's fist was flickering with astonishing light. On the other side, Bao Huang also unleashed a formidable attack. Countless treasure lights transformed into an endless army and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Bao Huang took the lead and rushed towards Yi Shiwen as if he was the commander of an army. Bullying me because I don't have much blood essence? But it's a pity that I'll have to disappoint you. Even so, killing you clowns is not difficult at all. Yi Shiwen sneered and rushed towards them. Facing the joint attack of two great emperor-level experts, Yi Shiwen didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced forward like a tiger in a flock of sheep. His whole body flickered with the power of time, intertwined into a divine light talisman. It descended from the sky and protected him, forcibly tearing apart the two's attack. This time, Yi Shiwen directly rushed towards Ba Huang. Among the three great emperor-level experts, Ba Huang was the strongest. He had unexpectedly stepped into the second realm. Obviously, he had encountered some kind of fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, he would have been at the peak of the first realm like Bao Huang and Jade Huang. Previously, he had destroyed Jade Huang's fighting strength. This time, he wanted to meet force with force and finish off Ba Huang. Die, Martial Emperor's Seal. Yi Shiwen raised his hand and ruthlessly smashed the incoming overlord's fist. Immediately after, the Martial Emperor's Seal flew out from the top of his head, and after spinning a few times, it instantly smashed down towards the overlord. The Martial Emperor's Seal grew bigger and bigger. It was like an ancient divine mountain, capable of smashing all opponents into pieces. 3,000 martial arts emerged around the Martial Emperor's Seal and condensed into the strongest attack. So strong! Ba Huang clearly knew that Yi Shiwen was planning to play the game of defeating them one by one. However, there was no way he could do it, because now, the initiative of the attack was in Yi Shiwen's hands, not his. You are in the second realm. I'm also in the second realm. I don't believe that there is such a big difference in strength between us. Block it for me? Endless domineering aura spread from Ba Huang's body, forming a golden bell cover in an attempt to resist the suppression of the Martial Emperor's Seal. How big is the difference? Ha ha ha, this is really funny. Dark Lord thought so too. Yi Shiwen sneered. They were both in the second realm. Dark Lord also thought that there was not much difference between them. In the end, he was killed by Yi Shiwen in one battle. He couldn't even escape. Bang! Ba Huang's domineering aura broke completely the moment it came into contact with the Martial Emperor's Seal. Then, the Martial Emperor's Seal smashed down. Puff! Ba Huang spouted a mouthful of blood. His entire body had been smashed by the Martial Emperor's Seal. His shoulder had been smashed into a pulp. If he hadn't dodged the attack, then it wouldn't have been his shoulder that had been smashed into powder. His head would have been smashed into powder instead. However, his body was still sent flying. That terrifying power was wreaking havoc in his body on the spot. His entire body's blood and chi were surging crazily. At this time, Ba Huang's army had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Since Yi Shiwen hadn't done anything just now, it was impossible to repel Ba Huang at this time. A long spear appeared in Ba Huang's hand. It pierced through the blue dome of heaven. It seemed as if it wanted to pierce through Yi Shiwen. This attack was too powerful. It directly smashed the galaxy. Especially, the endless Bao Huang's army behind him had covered the entire star field with their terrifying power. At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen's devil wings spread out from his back. Suddenly, a cave appeared in front of him. Whoosh! 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 Countless half-moon-shaped space blades flew out and directly bombarded the Bao Huang's army. Suddenly, a series of earth-shattering explosions occurred in all directions. Countless Bao Huang's army had been completely turned into powder by this series of attacks. It's useless, Yi Shiwen. This time you must die. The long spear in Ba Huang's hand had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen's face. Clang! A sound similar to the sound of metal colliding resounded. Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blocked the fatal spear attack of Bao Huang. This spear attack, which was capable of tearing the blue dome of heaven and shattering everything, was blocked by Yi Shiwen's palm. The shockwave formed by the collision between the two sides hadn't even spread out when it was crushed into nothingness by Yi Shiwen's hand. How is this possible? Ba Huang's eyes widened. He had never expected that his fatal attack would be blocked by Yi Shiwen so casually. This was a Dao tool. Yi Shiwen was able to block the attack of a Dao tool with his bare hands. Moreover, it didn't seem to be strenuous at all. How tyrannical was his body? How can he be so strong? Ba Huang was shocked. He was very clear about the might of the long spear in his hand. It was not any weaker than the Heaven Race's heaven-splitting spear. But now, it was completely useless. What's so strange about this? It's not like no one has been able to do it since ancient times. At least, Emperor Qin was able to do it. So, why can't I do it? Yi Shiwen's old face revealed a mocking expression. This long spear should be your body. It's very rare for a Dao tool to be able to cultivate to this level. It's a pity that you didn't cherish it. Now, all of you are going to die. Yi Shiwen's voice had barely faded when Bao Huang discovered that Yi Shiwen's figure had disappeared. When he regained his senses, he found that Yi Shiwen had already appeared in front of him. The martial emperor's seal in his hand had pierced into his lower abdomen. Chapter 2990. Bang! There was a huge explosion, and blood splashed everywhere. Bao Huang had never thought that Yi Shiwen could be so powerful. Puff! Bao Huang spouted a mouthful of blood, and his body was sent flying. The three emperors had joined hands to besiege Yi Shiwen, but he had defeated them one by one. This scene had shocked everyone. Everyone was scared silly. This scene was too shocking. The martial emperor is indeed tyrannical. His vitality has weakened to such an extent, but he can still burst out such a powerful fighting strength. How terrifying was he when he was at his peak? Many people couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and said. Even the Ice Emperor's face revealed a frightened look. He finally realized that Yi Shiwen hadn't been careless when he had asked him to stand guard. On the contrary, it was because Yi Shiwen had absolute trust in him. After all, these people were just clowns. However, the Ice Emperor immediately saw that Yi Shiwen's vitality had become even more sparse. The series of attacks had consumed a huge amount of his vitality. For a peerless emperor, this amount of vitality was too little. The martial emperor had displayed such amazing fighting strength with such little vitality. He had lived up to his illustrious reputation for many years. He was indeed extraordinary. Let's go all out. His vitality isn't even as good as before. It's obvious that he's about to die. If we don't kill him now, then when? Tyrant Emperor took the lead and roared. It was a great shame for him to be defeated by Yi Shiwen one by one. That's right. The injuries on our bodies are nothing. We can only fight to the death, kill him, and swallow his great Wei origin. Not only will we be able to stabilize our injuries, but we will also be able to advance further. The Jade Emperor's jade-like face revealed a sinister expression. They had already reached this point, and there was no way they could escape. Either Yi Shiwen would die, or they would die after Yi Shiwen had recovered. The three emperors were going all out. They ignited their blood essence and unleashed all kinds of worldly phenomena. It seemed as if the three of them had joined hands to evolve a world. They desperately rushed over, and there was no way out. Boom! 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 All sorts of terrifying explosions took place as Law Dao flowers bloomed one after another. The battle between the four of them had truly reached its peak. At this time, the four of them were no longer in their peak state. Yi Shiwen was shrouded by the law of death, and his vitality had weakened to a certain extent. On the other side, the three sovereigns had just been severely injured by Yi Shiwen, so they could not be considered to be in their peak state. The four of them weren't even in peak condition, especially Bao Huang, and Jade Huang. They couldn't wait to kill Yi Shiwen. The reason was very simple. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen's entire body was a peerless, precious medicine. The blood flowing in his body was a divine medicine that could restore them to their peak. They couldn't let him go. Yi Shiwen's qi and blood were declining more and more with the passage of time. He seemed to be getting older and older. However, the joint efforts of the three emperors couldn't stop his advancement at all. Yi Shiwen dragged the long sword in his hand and constantly waved it, slashing through the sky. Every slash could slash out tens of thousands of Sword Dao laws. He could already use the Sword Dao laws as he pleased. Under his feet, the world created by the three sovereigns expanded like a swamp, trying to stop Yi Shiwen's advance. But it was useless. There was an endless power of thunder under Yi Shiwen's feet, spreading out like a thunder snake. It was a small kingdom of thunder. The world created by the three sovereigns was broken, but it couldn't affect Yi Shiwen at all. Bang! Yi Shiwen slashed out with his sword, breaking the offensive of the three sovereigns. The Sword Dao laws condensed like flowers blooming with blazing light. It tore the universe apart and launched the offensive of the three sovereigns in one fell swoop. The power of this sword was extremely terrifying. No one could stop it. Anyone who stood in front of it would die. Bang! Yi Shiwen's sword slashed on the long spear in Bao Huang's hand. The long spear in Bao Huang's hand couldn't withstand it, and numerous cracks appeared on it. The cracks spread out in the void, forming a shockwave that rolled out. Bao Huang's palm cracked, and blood splashed out. He almost couldn't hold the long spear and was sent flying. Come again, Yi Shiwen. I don't believe that your blood and qi can hold on for much longer. Bao Huang roared. He was betting that Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to hold on, and that Yi Shiwen would die first. Yi Shiwen didn't even look at him. He raised the Avicii sword, and countless murderous auras condensed into countless sword lights around him. They blotted out the sky and the earth, and densely covered his entire body. Whoosh! 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 Countless sword lights, no. The Sword Dao laws condensed into a long river of sword light, and instantly rushed down. Damn, how can he have so many tricks up his sleeve? Bao Huang roared, and countless rays of light swept out from his body. His eyes were filled with a look of disbelief, and he couldn't believe it. Yi Shiwen had too many tricks up his sleeves. When he heard that Yi Shiwen had opened up 3,000 martial arts, he thought that it was just a joke, or maybe he was just blowing his own trumpet. Among the 3,000 martial arts, one could master any one of them, let alone 3,000. However, when he saw it for himself, he realized that he had underestimated the 3,000 martial arts. The fusion of the 3,000 martial arts was vividly reflected in Yi Shiwen's body. It could be said that all the martial arts were at his fingertips, and there wasn't the slightest feeling of stagnation. It could be said that the martial arts had truly reached the pinnacle. There were almost no flaws, and his attack and defense were orderly. Even if they were both emperors, Yi Shiwen's methods still shocked him. If Yi Shiwen's blood and qi weren't declining, and if he were in his peak condition, he would be able to kill them in no time. He was only at the second level, that's all. How could he be so strong? He vaguely saw the resurrection of Emperor Qin from countless years ago. In those days, Emperor Qin was not inferior to the current martial emperor, Yi Shiwen. He was incomparably strong and had killed 5 of his companions just after he had become an emperor. Those were not 5 cabbages, they were 5 emperors. So what? He was simply too strong. However, the killing intent in his eyes deepened. It was precisely because Yi Shiwen had made him afraid that he wanted to kill him even more. After being seriously injured by Emperor Qin, he had hidden away and recuperated for a long time. If it wasn't for that person who had helped him and sent him the healing medicine, he wouldn't be much better than Emperor Ming right now. He would never forget that day when Emperor Qin had barged into his place of recuperation. The way Emperor Qin looked at him was as if he was looking at a dead dog, disdainful. Yes, disdainful. He didn't care at all. That kind of humiliation, even now, he couldn't forget it. That time, he was very close to death, but Emperor Qin didn't kill him in the end. He knew that it wasn't because he couldn't kill him, but because he didn't care. I won't let that day happen again. Yi Shiwen, who do you think you are? Die for me. Bao Huang roared again and again. The blood in his body burned to the extreme, forcibly suppressing the injuries on his body. An armor appeared on his body. Rays of light soared into the sky, and the long river of swordsmanship crashed into the armor. Rumble! The swordsmanship continued to bombard the armor, and Bao Huang was pushed back again and again. However, he was still burning his blood, not giving Yi Shiwen a chance to break through. On the other side, the Tyrant Emperor and the Jade Emperor had already rushed over. The 3 of them couldn't be broken, otherwise the previous situation would repeat itself. And they had already seen the result of that. Perhaps they would die. However, Yi Shiwen frowned, and the blood in his body suddenly erupted. With his other hand, the martial emperor's seal slammed down. With 2 Dao tools, it was enough to suppress and kill all the strong enemies. Compared to other emperors, Yi Shiwen was extremely rich. He had a lot of Dao tools, and he had quite a few on him. This was something that others wouldn't even dare to think about. Bang! Bao Huang didn't expect Yi Shiwen to do this. He didn't even have time to react before being suppressed by the martial emperor's seal. Puff! Bao Huang suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and screamed in pain. His whole body was sent flying, and at the same time, he crazily burned his body, trying to block Yi Shiwen. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen had already flown above him, and the devil wings on his back formed a kingdom of wind and thunder, preventing the Tyrant Emperor and the Jade Emperor from rescuing him. And Yi Shiwen suddenly stomped down. Bang! A loud explosion sounded in the void, and the unknown grade of the armor on Bao Huang's body was crushed by Yi Shiwen's stomp. That terrifying stomp caused Bao Huang to fiercely fall down. No matter how hard Bao Huang tried to struggle, it was useless. Yi Shiwen's attack was even more indifferent and ruthless, and the sky-flipping seal directly fell down. Bang! 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 In just a few short breaths, Yi Shiwen didn't know how many times he had smashed the martial emperor's seal. Every time Bao Huang tried to reform his body, it would be destroyed. Countless times of reform and countless times of destruction. Even an emperor's tyrannical body couldn't withstand such a terrifying surprise attack, and was soon smashed into pieces and turned into a mass of blood fog. His soul was completely smashed by Yi Shiwen, and his body didn't even have the slightest ability to resist, and was absorbed by Yi Shiwen's demon flag. An emperor had fallen, and under the watchful eyes of everyone, Yi Shiwen had joined hands to suppress and kill Bao Huang in front of 3 people. Everyone felt as if their necks were being strangled, and with great difficulty, they were finally able to breathe. Strong, too strong, martial emperor is too strong. Since ancient times, he must be one of the strongest emperors. No, look at martial emperor. Chapter 2991. Everyone looked over and saw that Yi Shiwen was panting heavily. Obviously, he had consumed a lot of energy in the previous battle. Facing the subsequent attacks of the Tyrant Emperor and the Jade Emperor, Yi Shiwen unexpectedly began to take a defensive stance. One must know that from the beginning of the battle, Yi Shiwen had completely gained the upper hand. Even if the three of them joined forces, they were still no match for Yi Shiwen. And now, Yi Shiwen was finally showing signs of weakness. Many people were crying. At this point, the martial emperor was showing signs of weakness. It was unbelievable. It was as if the legend in their hearts was being destroyed. They knew that it was because the martial emperor's chi and blood were not strong enough, but it still made them feel like a hero past his prime. A hero past his prime. This feeling was ridiculous. For immortal existences like them, a hero past his prime was too far away. Many people were crying in sorrow. If this was the peak, the martial emperor could kill the three emperors' alliance without a scratch. A martial emperor was too strong. Everyone wasn't very clear about the strength of an emperor. However, they could clearly see Yi Shiwen's strength through such a comparison. They could easily see the disparity between Yi Shiwen and Yi Shiwen. Go, kill him, he's about to die. The tyrant emperor's domineering aura had been raised to the extreme. He was the only one who could pose a threat to Yi Shiwen because he was also at the second realm. Bao Emperor and the Jade Emperor were only at the first realm. No matter how hard they tried, they could not resist. Kill, you deserve to die. The Jade Emperor's complexion was incomparably sinister. How could such monsters appear one after another? How could they let them live? Could it be that there was such a big disparity between them, the Emperor-Emperors, who had become Emperor-Emperors by chance, and Yi Shiwen, who had become Emperor-Emperors by tearing the shackles? After all, they were all Imperial Emperors. They would never admit it, absolutely not. Kill. The Jade Emperor was the first to rush to Yi Shiwen. His jade-colored divine kingdom had already wrapped Yi Shiwen within it. He could see Yi Shiwen's aged face. His expression was incomparably fierce. Jumping clowns, how dare you call yourselves emperors with just these people? The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth flashed with a hint of coldness. It seemed to be the greatest mockery of them. He did not put these people in his eyes at all. They were all emperor-emperors. However, Yi Shiwen felt that these people were nothing more than clowns. They had used trickery to prove their Tao. How could they be compared with the emperor-emperors? The Jade Emperor almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard Yi Shiwen's words. Yi Shiwen's words didn't put them in his eyes at all. He regarded them as ants. This contempt and disregard made the Jade Emperor's heart burn with anger. You will pay for your words, he roared. In an instant, he used a forbidden technique. A jade-like world spread out. It was as if he wanted to turn the entire world into jade. This was an extremely terrifying technique. It was a forbidden technique. He needed to ignite his own source of the Great Path in order to use it. If he hadn't reached this point, he wouldn't have been willing to use it so easily. However, this guy in front of him was too despicable and terrifying at the same time. He had no choice but to do this. Walalala! Yi Shiwen's clothes were fluttering in the wind due to that dreadful attack. Countless attacks were concentrated on one point and went straight towards Yi Shiwen's glabella, intending to end his life in one move. Since the start of the fight, Yi Shiwen had not been injured at all. This was too much of a slap in the face. They were beaten up every minute. Now, they wanted to avenge themselves. He firmly believed that Yi Shiwen definitely did not have enough vitality to block this move. Rumble! As expected, Yi Shiwen did not make a move to resist. He let the jade-colored frenzy drown him completely. It was as if the entire world was drowned in an instant. There was only this jade-green color left in the world. Damn it! In that instant, the Ice Emperor couldn't help but want to make a move, but he didn't in the end, because he knew that if even a martial emperor died, he alone wouldn't be able to take down these two heavily injured people. After all, they were two imperial monarchs, and he wasn't a martial emperor, so he couldn't fight a few of them alone. More importantly, the tyrant emperor, who had been pouncing towards Yi Shiwen, had unknowingly stopped. He was firmly staring at the Ice Emperor. It was obvious that he was warning her. The Overlord, who was already at the second realm, had formed an obvious suppression on the Ice Emperor, who was still at the first realm. That kind of terrifying willpower was originally born by Yi Shiwen's willpower, but now it fell on the Ice Emperor. The Ice Emperor finally understood how strong these three people were for the first time, especially the Tyrant Emperor. He was a realm above the Ice Emperor. But even so, the three of them had joined hands, but they had still been beaten like dogs by Yi Shiwen. If he was still at the peak, how terrifying would it be? At this moment, for the first time, he completely gave up the idea of competing with Yi Shiwen. The gap between them was too big. He secretly warned himself in his heart that within 100,000 years, he must absolutely not have such thoughts. As for after 100,000 years, if Yi Shiwen did not die, he should have grown to an unimaginable level. At that time, he might not even have the heart to resist. Even if he really reached the Emperor realm, the gap was still like a mountain. Martial Emperor. Compared to the Ice Emperor's complicated thoughts, everyone's thoughts were much simpler. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen, who was annihilated by the jade-colored frenzy, and exclaimed, especially the people from the Divine Palace. It was not that they did not believe in Yi Shiwen, but Yi Shiwen's vitality was too weak. It was already at such a stage, but the martial emperor still persisted in fighting. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been killed long ago. It was already a miracle that he could persist until now. Suddenly, something strange happened. A big hand grabbed out of the endless jade-colored frenzy and grabbed the Jade Emperor's neck. How is this possible? The Jade Emperor's eyes widened. The ferocious look on his face almost instantly froze on his face. He had never expected such a shocking change to happen. In the next moment, he couldn't speak anymore. His neck was grabbed tightly. That was a close call. I almost died here. This move should be your last taboo move. You have left a mark on this world by releasing it. You won't die an unjust death. Yi Shiwen's hoarse voice resounded. There seemed to be a bit of self-deprecation in it, but it also seemed as if he was ridiculing the opposite party. The Jade Emperor struggled with all his might. However, he found that he could not break free. It seemed as if the magic power of his body had been sealed. Even his blood had stopped flowing. In an instant, he lost control of the world. Not only his body, but the laws around him had also been completely lost. This was absolutely impossible. As an emperor, even if he had used a trick, his control over the laws could be considered as one of the strongest in the world. Now that he had completely lost control, this situation caused him to panic. If he could see above his head, he would see that the word seal was rotating. It had sealed his body, sealed his magic power, and isolated his control over his magic power. Do you have any last words? If you don't, then die, Yi Shiwen said slowly. His expression was extremely cold. Perhaps it had been a long time since he had been so angry. The three emperors had joined forces and attacked him at the most dangerous time. They had almost caused him to fail miserably. What a joke, the Jade Emperor said slowly. Asking him to say his last words was simply the most ridiculous joke. Bang! However, as soon as he finished speaking, he saw Yi Shiwen suddenly grab the Jade Emperor's head and it exploded on the spot. It turned into a rain of blood that covered the sky and shattered into pieces. However, the Jade Emperor did not grow a new head as everyone had expected. Everyone was shocked and did not know what to say. Only the Ice Emperor could see that the Jade Emperor had been sealed. His vitality had been sealed. Even the vitality in his body had been sealed by Yi Shiwen's hand. What a terrifying skill! What a terrifying method! The healing ability that the Emperor body was so proud of was completely sealed in front of Yi Shiwen. What was this? This was one hand covering the sky. The demon's summoning banner flew out and swallowed the Jade Emperor's corpse. Yi Shiwen's vitality had once again declined by a large margin, but this time, no one dared to look down on him anymore. Every time everyone thought that he had been forced into a dead end, he would use practical actions to ruthlessly slap everyone in the face. Who knew if this was Yi Shiwen's limit? At his level, he could casually pluck a leaf and shatter the stars in the universe. Who knew how many more tricks he had up his sleeves? The Tyrant Emperor was stunned. He did not know whether he should make a move now. Just now, the Jade Emperor thought that Yi Shiwen had been forced into a dead end. In reality, the one who had been forced into a dead end was the Jade Emperor himself. And now, was Yi Shiwen really a lamp that had run out of oil? Or was this another trap? He was scared. Yes, he was scared by Yi Shiwen's endless means. Yi Shiwen just looked at him, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Then, he sat down cross-legged. Behind him, a phoenix faintly soared into the sky and turned into a sea of fire that soared into the sky. Then, it swooped down and rushed into Yi Shiwen's body. In the eyes of everyone, the flames brought by the fire phoenix seemed to have brought vitality. The death aura on Yi Shiwen's body was being expelled at a terrifying speed. Or rather, the death aura on Yi Shiwen's body was being burned into smoke by the fire phoenix. It could no longer cause any harm to Yi Shiwen. Chapter 2992. The flames on Yi Shiwen's body seemed to be able to incinerate all the deathly aura in the world. Deathly aura constantly emerged from his body and then was incinerated alive. Everyone was shocked. How could there be so much deathly aura in this vast and boundless ocean? Even those quasi-emperors swallowed their saliva. Just a little bit of that vast and pure deathly aura could corrode them to death, let alone ordinary deities. Behind Yi Shiwen, the Ice Emperor was also startled. What kind of joke is this? Even an emperor will die if so much death energy approaches him. He had lived here for a very long time, even longer than many of the old antiques who were still alive today. The things he had seen and experienced were far from what ordinary people could imagine. Sometimes being old wasn't just for show. It was a real advantage. However, even with his lifetime of experience, he had never seen such a rich and pure deathly aura. He was also present during Yi Shiwen's battle against the Netherworld Kingdom. He had seen the earth-shattering power of Netherworld Emperor. However, he had a feeling that even the deathly aura on Netherworld Emperor wasn't as rich as Yi Shiwen's. This deathly aura almost surpassed heaven and earth. It surpassed life and death. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to encounter such pure deathly aura, let alone being contaminated by it. Moreover, emperors had the instinct to seek fortune and avoid calamity. When they saw such a fierce deathly aura, they would generally hide far away. Even if they took out a little to study, they wouldn't be contaminated by so much. If he were to be contaminated by so much deathly aura, not only would his chi and blood deteriorate, but he would also be ground to death by the deathly aura. Even though he was already an emperor, he was still very clear that there were still things in this world that he couldn't provoke. Unless it was the likes of Netherworld Emperor who specialized in this. Otherwise, who would dare to provoke so much deathly aura? Therefore, he was also very puzzled. How did Yi Shiwen become like this? This wasn't normal. However, he was an emperor, so he couldn't see through all this. He could only watch as the fire phoenix on Yi Shiwen's body became hotter and hotter, and the deathly aura that was being extinguished became more and more abundant. And with the gradual reduction of the death chi, Yi Shiwen's chi and blood, which had been suppressed to the extreme, began to gradually recover. Many experts of the divine court realm couldn't help but shed tears of joy when they saw this scene. It was too thrilling just now. Even though Yi Shiwen had killed 2 sovereign emperors in a row, they didn't feel the slightest bit relieved because it seemed like Yi Shiwen was putting on a strong front. Yi Shiwen's blood was constantly decreasing, and it seemed as if he could die at any time. How could they not be shocked? But now, Yi Shiwen finally showed signs of recovery. So, how could they not be overjoyed? However, at this time, the overlord who had been frightened by Yi Shiwen finally made his move at this moment. He could no longer watch Yi Shiwen recover, otherwise, he might be chased to death by Yi Shiwen. Just like the Qin Emperor from countless years ago, he was also a cold and emotionless person. It was absolutely impossible for him to let him off. Boom! His fist cut through the sky and went straight towards Yi Shiwen's eyebrows. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen would be killed in the next moment. How dare you? How dare you? No! These experts of the divine court realm began to shout, but it was useless. The overlord would not show mercy at all. This blow directly blasted through the sky, and the overbearing fist pressure suppressed the world. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes and said, "It's a pity that you still hesitated. If you had attacked just now, you might have had a chance. But now, it's too late." Boom! Before he finished speaking, the time power of the chrono robe on his body erupted and swept into a huge tornado that swept in all directions, wrapping Yi Shiwen up. Bang! The Overlord's fist of the Overlord seemed to have blasted the world, and it fiercely blasted on Yi Shiwen's chrono robe. However, it couldn't break through the protection of the chrono robe. How is this possible? The Overlord's eyes widened because he discovered that Yi Shiwen's aura had increased by several levels. Compared to before, the blood in his body was much stronger. Impossible. How long has it been? It's impossible for you to recover so quickly. What's so strange about that? You all thought that I was contaminated with this death energy because I was seriously injured. But what if that's not the case? Yi Shiwen's lips curled into a smile. What, then today? The Tyrant Emperor suddenly opened his eyes because he thought of a terrifying possibility. If Yi Shiwen wasn't seriously injured and had been contaminated by the death chi, then it was very obvious that this was all a conspiracy. And if this was a conspiracy, then he didn't dare to imagine it. Clearly, Yi Shiwen had specially set up a conspiracy to kill them. How did Yi Shiwen know of his existence? How was Yi Shiwen so sure that they would rush over upon hearing the news? How did he calculate all of this? Impossible. We all know your situation. Don't try to deceive us. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Do you think I'll be deceived by you? The Overlord immediately reacted. One must know that Yi Shiwen could pretend otherwise. But from the start of the battle until now, Yi Shiwen's situation of insufficient blood energy was very obvious. Logically speaking, if it was just to trick them, then there was no need to pretend. But in fact, Yi Shiwen's weakness was known to everyone. This couldn't be faked. If they couldn't even confirm this, then they should really kill themselves. It was really too embarrassing. So he could completely confirm that Yi Shiwen was definitely not faking it. It's true that I'm contaminated with death energy, but I'm not seriously injured. Instead, I'm transforming, Yi Shiwen said slowly. He didn't even have the intention to continue hiding it. At this time, everyone from the myriad heavens who was paying attention finally understood why Yi Shiwen suddenly became like this. Originally, all of this seemed very abnormal, but now there was a very reasonable explanation. It wasn't that Yi Shiwen was crazy, but that this was all part of his plan. You still want to deceive me to buy time. Unfortunately, I won't be fooled again. The Overlord seemed to have already thought of this. His blood energy was raised to the peak. Absolutely terrifying power condensed in his fist. As an expert of the Second Realm, he was indeed much more tyrannical than the Jade Emperor and Bao Emperor of the First Realm. For a moment, the fist energy scattered like a rain of light. Divine light filled the sky, and in an instant, the most tyrannical power erupted. It's useless. I said before, if you attacked earlier, you might have had a chance. But now, you no longer have any chance. And at this time, Yi Shiwen suddenly stood up, and his arm slashed down like a sharp sword. Boom! The Overlord's terrifying power couldn't even get close to Yi Shiwen. It was completely obliterated. And Yi Shiwen's arm, that had transformed into a sharp sword, did not lose momentum. It fiercely slammed into the Overlord's body. Bang! The Overlord was sent flying. In midair, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was densely packed with cracks, as if it would collapse at any time. His eyes flickered with unimaginable shock. Yi Shiwen's understanding of swordsmanship was too terrifying. Just with his bare hands, he could unleash the full power of a Dao tool. This sword was already comparable to the power of an ordinary sword Dao tool. How could he be so strong? At this time, he finally felt a chill in his heart. He finally understood how terrifying this person in front of him was. He was simply a monster. Even if his condition was indeed not at his peak, at least he could crush an emperor like him without any pressure. Yes, at this moment, this was how he felt. This kind of emperor, who used the opportunity to become an emperor, would never be able to truly reach the peak. They would never be able to see that state of invincibility in the world. And Yi Shiwen directly chased after him. Every step he took in the sky could fill the sky with flames. His entire body seemed to be completely surrounded by a ball of flames. Faintly, he turned into a flying phoenix and soared into the sky. Bang! His next attack directly bombarded the Overlord's body. Immediately, the Overlord spat out another mouthful of blood. He could no longer maintain his physical body, which he had painstakingly maintained, and it directly collapsed. However, an even more terrifying attack was just the beginning. Yi Shiwen's powerful aura blasted over like a storm. Even if the Tyrant Emperor was also in the second realm like Yi Shiwen, he did not have the slightest chance of winning when facing Yi Shiwen at this time. He also did not have the slightest thought of turning the tables. On the contrary, he only had the idea of constantly escaping, quickly escaping. Then, he would find a place to hide and recuperate. He did not believe that Yi Shiwen could remain in power forever. There would be a time when Yi Shiwen would fall. At that time, he would still have a chance to take revenge. At the very least, he would be able to escape and not die in the hands of this lunatic. Yes, in his eyes, Yi Shiwen was a lunatic. He actually used such a state to lure all of them out. If they did not come out, wouldn't Yi Shiwen's efforts be in vain? And the other party did not seem to have thought of such a problem at all. He was incomparably confident that he had completely schemed against them. Everything was within his calculations. Bang! 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 The Overlord's physical body was smashed again and again. No matter how sturdy his spirit was, it could not withstand such a storm of attacks at all. However, at this moment, a big hand suddenly grabbed out from the void and directly grabbed the Overlord. Chapter 2993. This big, jade-like hand directly tore the sky curtain apart. It seemed as if it had grabbed from another crystal wall and directly grabbed towards the Overlord who was on the verge of dying under Yi Shiwen's relentless attacks. You want to save someone from me? Don't tell me I'm not prepared at all? Yi Shiwen sneered. It was as though time and space had been frozen by this attack. What is this? Ice Emperor was the first to react among the crowd. He was an emperor, so his reaction was naturally much faster than ordinary people. He found that even he seemed to be frozen by this big hand. How is this possible? His first reaction was disbelief. One must know that with his strength, even if Yi Shiwen could defeat him and kill him, it was impossible to stop him. Not to mention that this big hand didn't seem to be in the myriad heavens world at all, but in another distant place. Despite being so far away, the shockwave was still able to nearly freeze him in place. What kind of terrifying existence was this? Compared to the master of this huge hand, be it Shao Chun or a martial emperor, they were not a match at all. It could even be said that they were on a completely different level. Is there really someone in this world who can be so tyrannical? He couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He almost couldn't believe it. If this was the case, then even the emperor couldn't really control this world. However, if this was the case, why had he never heard of the existence of such a person in the myriad heavens after living for so long? He had experienced the mythological era, the ancient era, the medieval era, and the modern era, until now. However, such a person had never appeared in the myriad heavens. However, looking at Yi Shiwen's appearance, it was definitely not the first time he heard of the existence of this person. Could it be that this is a secret that only the Emperor knows? At this moment, he suddenly understood that in this world, there seemed to be many secrets that he was completely unaware of. Even if he had lived for so long, even if he had become an emperor, he was still not invincible. Perhaps after today, he would have to talk to the martial emperor about where these 3 martial emperors had come from. Also, what exactly was that giant hand that had broken through the void and grabbed him? How many things in this world did he not know about? This matter really made him feel very conflicted. Yi Shiwen's body started to spin at this moment. The martial emperor's seal suddenly flew up and ferociously bombarded that big hand. Boom! The martial emperor's seal collided with the huge hand. It was an earth-shattering collision. Both sides seemed to be equally matched. The martial emperor's seal sent the huge hand flying. Yi Shiwen's complexion immediately changed a little because he knew how terrifying his martial emperor's seal was. Even an emperor lord would be severely injured if he received it with his bare hands. However, this attack was actually evenly matched. The martial emperor's seal was actually unable to destroy this huge hand. This was the first time, so he understood. This is actually your real body. You actually dared to descend in your real body. You really have a lot of guts. Yi Shiwen shouted. And at this moment, the overlord in front of him was swept away by a mysterious force. Yi Shiwen was very clear that this person should have some scruples, so there was no way to penetrate from outside the heavens and realms. This was like a person in a house who could freely enter and exit every room, as long as he opened the door. This was like the relationship within the heavens and realms. However, if someone wanted to enter from outside the heavens and realms, they would have to pass through the iron gate at the door. It might even be a security door. Under normal circumstances, it was simply impossible. If one wanted to descend in forcefully, they would definitely have to pay a huge price. However, this person actually directly descended in his real body on the spot. This could be said to be extremely courageous. This big hand had no intention of talking to Yi Shiwen at all. The jade-like palm directly grew bigger and bigger, and on the spot, it slapped towards Yi Shiwen's head. This was a kind of trampling, completely not taking Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Everyone from the Divine Palace sect cried out in alarm. What was going on today? They had actually witnessed such a shocking scene. Yi Shiwen was a martial emperor and had been famous for countless years. Yet someone actually wanted to slap his head. This was simply looking down on Yi Shiwen. After he became a martial emperor, perhaps no one would dare to be so presumptuous anymore. Who was this person? On Yi Shiwen's body, the time robe flew up and turned into a time domain. The divine kingdom of time contained this big hand in it. It wanted to control time so that it could not advance even an inch. This was because everything in the heavens and realms was under the control of the two great laws of space and time. There were no exceptions. If one could control time, one could control everything. After the attack of this big hand paused for a moment, it suddenly broke away from the entanglement of this time, domain, and directly slapped down. Boom! The divine kingdom of time that Yi Shiwen had transformed was smashed on the spot. Then, this big hand directly slapped Yi Shiwen's body. Puff! Yi Shiwen suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, as if he had suffered a heavy blow. Everyone was shocked and stupefied. One must know that Yi Shiwen hadn't suffered any injuries even when he had fought with the three emperors. Even at the most critical moment, he had only fallen into a slight disadvantage. But he had quickly regained the upper hand. So, what was the origin of this big hand? How could it be so tyrannical? Yi Shiwen retreated again and again. His eyes flashed with a bit of sharpness. Was this his real body? Although Yi Shiwen had fought with his incarnation before, he had never really fought with his real body. Just one hand was already able to crush Yi Shiwen with one hand. This person's strength was really tyrannical to a shocking extent. There had been many emperors since the ancient times. However, Yi Shiwen didn't know which emperor could be tyrannical to this extent. Perhaps the legendary Emperor Huang Xianyuan, who was known as the strongest, or the several emperors of the Tian clan, who were even more powerful. However, he had never seen those people, so there was no way to compare them. Yi Shiwen understood that the most crucial reason why he was seriously injured by this palm was his own problem. He was not at his peak now, although a part of the death energy was expelled, and his chi and blood began to gradually recover. His combat power was also gradually recovering. However, after all, he was not at his peak, so he would still be affected. If he recovered to his peak, even if it was this big hand, he could even fight evenly. Didn't Emperor Qin fight evenly with him in the past? Although it did not descend in full body, for Yi Shiwen, it was enough. At this moment, suddenly, there was a sudden change. In the sky, a huge eye looked over, looking in the direction of the big hand. Yi Shiwen could clearly feel that countless laws formed a terrifying attack directly bombarded in the direction of the big hand. Unexpectedly, the big hand could only snort coldly and retreat. Heaven's Way. In the end, it was still the Heaven's Way that took action. It must be that the Heaven's Way had noticed that there was a foreign invasion, so it finally manifested. What was the Heaven's Way? No one could clearly explain it, and no one could clearly explain it. The only thing that was clear was that the Heaven's Way was the collective manifestation of the will of all living beings in the world. It was all living beings, but it was also not all living beings. Therefore, many people simply could not understand the strength of the Heaven's Way because it could not compete with all living beings. Just like a house, if a robber invaded, it would definitely activate the anti-theft system. If it was not for the existence of the Heaven's Way, perhaps this person would have really rushed in. A mere crystal wall of the myriad heavens world would definitely not be able to stop the other party. At this time, Yishuan also understood why this person had only appeared a few times in the long history of the myriad heavens world. Compared to forcibly manifesting, one would need to pay a high price, and it could not last for long. Very soon, it would attract the backlash of the Heaven's Way. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, if he did not dare to go against the Heaven's Way, it would be courting death. He did not know if there was anyone who could compete with the existence of the Heaven's Way. At least for now, he did not know such an existence. In the myriad heavens world, the Heaven's Way was the major shareholder who held absolute control of the shares, and he was just a small shareholder. Although he also had some power, how could he be compared with the major shareholder? Therefore, if he wanted to interfere with the myriad heavens world, he must inevitably use the people here. Just like last time, he entered an emperor corpse, and this time, he chose the emperor corpse, which was an overlord. In terms of cultivation, the overlord was many times more tyrannical than the emperor corpse from last time. Once he succeeded, he did not know how much more he would need. Without external enemies, the eye of the Heaven's Way disappeared without a trace. Although the Heaven's Way was powerful, it did not have spiritual intelligence after all. It was only an amalgamation of the will of all things, and it did not have its own will. In front of Yi Shiwen, the cyclone that was wrapped around the overlord grew larger and larger, and the myriad heavens world could feel that terrifying aura, and a terrifying force was being drawn into it. And Yi Shiwen could also feel the terror of this aura, but he did not rush forward. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and took advantage of this time to completely expel the death aura, recover to the peak, or even stronger, and break through to the third realm in one go. Yes, this was within his calculations, to use the endless death aura to seek life and death, to completely complete the transformation of the Emperor body, and from then on, to rush from the second realm to the third realm. This was originally within his plan, and he only wanted to try and see if he could use this to lure out the hidden hand in the myriad heavens world. Unexpectedly, it really succeeded, and the Overlord and the other two appeared. Whether it was the Cyclone or Yi Shiwen, both were transforming, and they were racing against time. Chapter 2994. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged and faced the cyclone from a distance. He did not move forward, nor did he bother with it. The deathly aura on his body was still transforming at an astonishing speed. There was life in the midst of death. That was Yi Shiwen's present state. On one side was death, and on the other side was life. Yi Shiwen's present state was extremely terrifying and extremely strange. Yi Shiwen did not completely expel the deathly aura, but instead, he had expelled it to a state of complete equilibrium. Therefore, half of his body was life, and the other half was death. It was as though his body was divided into a state of life and death. The people from the Divine Palace were very worried, but they could not participate in it. It was even because they did not know what Yi Shiwen was doing, especially Yi Qianqian, Huang Minghan, and Dawn. They were extremely worried. It was not that their husband was incapable, but the unknown existence was too powerful. It was because they could not understand Yi Shiwen's state. There's no need to worry. A martial emperor is trying to break through realms. Life and death are forgotten. Using such a state to break through is indeed the best method. However, it is also very dangerous. I once saw an Empyrean king use such a method, but he eventually died. Yi Mo said with narrowed eyes. Among the people present, he was the most knowledgeable. He had once followed the demonic lord to conquer the world. In terms of realms, the demonic lord was only higher than the present Yi Shiwen. Therefore, he could see many things clearly. Then what do we do? Dawn immediately clenched her tiny fists. Her tiny face was filled with panic, especially when Emo mentioned that someone had used such a method to break through to a higher realm but ended up dying. It nearly gave her a fright. She had a decisive personality, and it was not that she had never experienced any hardships. However, she was used to living a comfortable life over the years. Furthermore, it was related to Yi Shiwen, so she could not help but feel nervous. What's the rush? Of course he'll be fine. That person's death has nothing to do with a martial emperor. He made this choice because he was confident. You all have to watch carefully. It's not every day that you get to see a martial emperor making a breakthrough. In the future, when you make a breakthrough, it might be a crucial experience. Yimo said. Hua Menghan and Yi Qianqian's eyes never left Yi Shiwen. This was because Dawn did not seek to improve her cultivation level. But the two of them were different. They had already reached the final step. One more step and they would be imperial kings. Such experience was extremely important to them. Furthermore, they believed in Yi Mo's judgment. For Yi Shiwen to dare to do so, he naturally had the confidence. And among those present, other than Yi Mo, only Frost Empress knew the significance of this. He could tell that Yi Shiwen was making a breakthrough, and such breakthrough experience was something he lacked. In fact, he had just cultivated to the Imperial King realm. He was still a long way from the peak of the First Realm, much less making a breakthrough. However, he also understood that such an experience today was extremely rare. Observing an Imperial King's breakthrough at such a close distance was definitely a rare opportunity. Typically, when an Imperial King broke through, they would choose an absolutely safe place to do so. Otherwise, they would be exposed to everyone. Therefore, this was a rare opportunity for him. But other than the opportunity, his heart was also trembling in an unknown way. It was not because of Yi Shiwen, but because of the terrifying aura that erupted from the cyclone on the other side. It was as if a peerless beast was hiding within. Now it was finally awakening and devouring the world. He knew that it was an overlord inside, but he did not know what it was now. The only person who knew all of this was probably the martial emperor himself. There were too many things in this world that he did not know at all. For an imperial king, these secrets were not something that could be easily known. His eyes stared at Yi Shiwen's back, wanting to see more from it. What kind of breakthrough method was this? Could he learn from such a method in the future? After stepping into the Imperial King realm, he had thoroughly understood that Imperial Kings were not truly invincible. There were still 9 great realms above them. Just thinking about it made people despair. Even if he could endure for countless years and become an emperor with his new ambition, he could not help but feel a little despair. Now, he would not let go of any place that could be used as a reference, because the person in front of him was already an expert of the Second Realm many years ago. He had crushed the Underworld Lord who was also in the Second Realm. Now that he was going to make a breakthrough, naturally it would not be the Second Realm, but the Third Realm. How many years had it been? He had only attained the Tao for about 20,000 years. Including the years he had cultivated, it had only been 30,000 years or so, and he had already reached the Third Realm. This kind of speed was simply unheard of. Based on his long life experience, it was still inconceivable. Moreover, after stepping into this realm, he was no longer guessing about the Imperial King realm. Instead, he had a clear understanding of it. He was also very clear that it would take hundreds of thousands of years to cross any of the 9 realms of Imperial King. For some people, even if they cultivated to the Imperial King realm, their brilliance was still dazzling enough to cover everyone else. Yi Shiwen was such a person. The violent aura in his blood, and she became more and more intense. The aura of life and death entangled on Yi Shiwen's body, forming a terrifying storm that soared into the sky. Under these 2 auras, the entire universe trembled, feared, and prostrated. There were only these 2 people who dominated the world. No one else could be compared to these 2 people. Endless brilliance erupted from these 2 people, soared into the sky, and shattered the galaxy. No one knew how long had passed. Everyone's eyes were fixed on these 2 people. Time seemed to have no meaning at this moment. Boom! An earth-shattering aura soared into the sky. In that cyclone, a figure tore everything apart. A finger pointed at Yi Shiwen's forehead, who was in closed-door cultivation. A terrifying killing blow appeared in an instant. Even the Ice Emperor felt the blood in his whole body solidify. Even though it was not directed at him, this blow still made him feel terrified. Yes, he was completely terrified. This was an extremely terrifying blow. Boom! This attack directly submerged into Yi Shiwen's body. Yi Shiwen's ascending momentum was interrupted, and he stagnated. Not good. The Martial Emperor's breakthrough is about to fail. Ice Emperor suddenly felt a sense of panic. Yi Shiwen's momentum had been interrupted. And when one was in closed-door cultivation, this kind of stagnation was extremely terrifying. All cultivators should understand how terrifying it was. Blood flowed from the corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth. This was the second time he had been injured. When he faced that big hand previously, even though he was strong enough to enter the Martial Emperor realm, there was no way to resist it. This time he had to take this blow head-on. Humph! That figure coldly snorted and continuously bombarded out fatal and destructive moves. Although it was clearly an overlord's body as the foundation, the strength that this person displayed far exceeded the overlord's level of power. Puff! 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 Every blow of these attacks fell into Yi Shiwen's body, and every blow stopped Yi Shiwen's ascending momentum. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Martial Emperor! Everyone shouted in grief and indignation. There was no more grievance than being robbed and killed during a breakthrough. Such attacks were simply endless. These attacks could destroy the world, but Yi Shiwen completely withstood all of them. Suddenly, the figure's endless attacks stopped, and he slowly walked out. Martial Emperor, you don't need to play these boring tricks. Do you think I will fall for it? That old voice was chaotic, and no one could hear anything special about it. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen after hearing his words. Was it really as he said? Was Yi Shiwen really hiding something? The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth slightly flashed a smile. He bit the blood and said, I really didn't expect that you would see through me. After he finished speaking, he swallowed his breath, and the stagnant aura on his body began to rise crazily. After reaching a limit, it only lasted for a few breaths, and then it continued to attack. It seemed as if he had broken through something in one breath. Boom! A terrifying aura swept out from his body, forming a terrible cyclone that expanded in all directions. Rays of light began to appear crazily in the sky, stretching for hundreds of thousands of miles and covering the entire universe. This is a breakthrough. Ice Emperor's eyes widened. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen's aura continued to rise and almost reached another level. The third realm. Yi Shiwen had finally stepped into that level after becoming an emperor 20,000 years ago. He had truly stepped into the third realm of the 9 realms of sovereign lords. Everyone from the Divine Palace was naturally overjoyed to see that the Martial Emperor was not only fine, but had also reached a higher level. They were naturally overjoyed. Yi Shiwen slowly stood up. I didn't expect you to be able to see through this. From the attack just now, I sensed that something was wrong. Although these attacks were terrifying, they weren't able to kill you. You were probably waiting for me to relax a little so that you could kill me in one fell swoop. The terrifying figure slowly said, I didn't expect that a dignified Martial Emperor would need to set up a trap to deal with me. I'm really honored. If I'm not wrong, you suddenly appeared with a dying face in order to finally lure me out. Yes, in the current world, I am already invincible. There is no one that I need to set up a trap to deal with. But you are different. You come from the outer domain, and you are very strong. Yi Shiwen said. He looked at the figure and admitted that he was very strong. It was precisely because he was very strong that he came up with this method. And all this actually originated from the matter that he had accidentally seen when he was looking at the ancient books of the martial sect. After Emperor Qin had become an emperor, he had been besieged by 8 emperor lords and had almost died tragically. It could be said to be the most tragic battle in Emperor Qin's life. In that battle, Emperor Qin had finally killed 5 powerful emperor lords. However, 3 emperor lords had escaped with injuries, and had never appeared again. Chapter 2995. This was nothing at first. Although that battle was indeed earth-shattering and involved 8 emperors, including the Emperor Qin, it was a battle between 9 emperors. However, it made Yi Shiwen think of something else, which was the Kurfürst Road. Could it be related to the Kurfürst Road? Or rather, it was related at all. The Emperor Qin later tried to conquer the Kurfürst Road, but he did not succeed in the end. At that time, there seemed to be a great war, but no one knew the result. It was just that the Emperor Qin gave up on conquering the Kurfürst Road. After that, the Qin Emperor continued to fight with unknown enemies many times. In addition to what Yi Shiwen had encountered before, it made him understand a lot of things that he could not understand before. Those people should be the emperors originally cultivated in the Kurfürst Road. Including the rebellious emperor, there should be 9 of them. If it was like this, then after the Emperor Qin killed 5 of them, and he killed the rebellious emperor, there should be 3 left. From the ancient books of the martial sect, Yi Shiwen knew the names of the remaining 3 people, Bao Huang, Ba Huang, and Jade Huang. Even the higher-ups of the martial great sect didn't know about this. That was because only the emperor could open that ancient book. And no one in the martial great sect had been able to become an emperor after Emperor Qin. Therefore, Yi Shiwen hadn't seen it until he flipped through it. And this period of history had finally seen the light of day. It was also because of this that Yi Shiwen had a sense of crisis, because this was not his imagination. He had indeed fought with that person. Although his body did not enter, it could be said that he had fought with that person from a distance. Therefore, Yi Shiwen must be fully prepared to completely cut off that person's claws that extended to this world. To achieve this step, he needed to lure that person out, so there was this situation today. If it was outside the heavens and myriad world, he was definitely not the opponent of that person behind the scenes. However, in the heavens and myriad world, it was completely different. He was a reigning emperor, and he had the protection of the heavenly way. Moreover, that person could not enter the heavens and myriad world with his real body. Otherwise, the Emperor Qin, who had just become an emperor, would die prematurely, and it would not be as simple as the emperors created by him besieging the Emperor Qin. It was precisely because of this that Yi Shiwen had the confidence to fight with him and kill him. He wouldn't let him have the chance to cause trouble in the myriad heavens world again. That was because he had more important things to do later on. He couldn't waste his time here, so he had to settle everything in one go. Things went smoothly. He successfully lured Ba Huang and the others over and killed Jade Huang and Bao Huang. Although Ba Huang was rescued by him, it seemed that he had been possessed by someone else and was no longer a threat. He was no different from being dead. However, his only regret was that he still couldn't deceive that person in the end and failed to lure him over. In fact, when Yi Shiwen appeared in front of everyone, he had already completed most of the preparations for breaking through to the third realm. He was only left with one last step. He had also prepared the method to forget about life and death. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill 2 emperors in such a weakened state, even if he was stronger. In the end, he had even forced the tyrant emperor into a dead end. Therefore, he had been suppressing his anger and hadn't made the final breakthrough. He had wanted to deceive that person and lure him over. Then he would kill him in one fell swoop to cut off his thoughts. Then he would use his great magic power to seal the myriad heavens world so that he wouldn't have the opportunity to attack again. Unfortunately, he had been seen through. This made his previous plan fall through. This was a pity because he knew that the person in front of him was very strong and had been planning for countless years. Although he didn't know what he was planning, he could tell that he wasn't an ordinary person just by looking at the fact that he could command so many emperors to serve him. It would be best if he could kill him with a sneak attack. As he had said before, the only person in the present world who needed him to set a trap to kill was this person in front of him. It seems that you have been scheming for a long time. I didn't expect that you would even know me. That person looked at Yi Shiwen and said coldly. His expression was incomparably cold. That's right. I wouldn't have known that such a terrifying person like you existed if I hadn't gone through the ancient books. I wouldn't be able to sleep in peace if I don't eliminate you and chop off your claws. Yi Shiwen said indifferently. The Ice Emperor's pupils contracted. Who was a martial emperor? He was invincible in the present world. However, Yi Shiwen had described this person in front of him as terrifying. Who was he? His heart felt like it was being scratched by a pair of hands. It was itching. He wanted to know who this person in front of him was. He had thought of many things, but he really didn't know. Perhaps only the martial emperor knew. He really wanted to find out. Just as Yi Shiwen had said, he wouldn't be able to sleep in peace if he didn't eliminate such a terrifying person. How could he allow someone to sleep beside him? It was my biggest mistake not to eliminate you before you became a martial emperor. This person looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. I'm afraid that you didn't know that I could become a martial emperor before that. Yi Shiwen said with a slight sarcasm. It's already a miracle for one person to become a martial emperor during the confinement period. You didn't expect that I could become a martial emperor again, right? Emperor Qin became a martial emperor and killed 5 of your subordinates. Then, I'll kill 4 of your emperor lord servants. How many tricks do you have now? Many people couldn't help but gasp when they heard this. Who was this person? He actually had 9 emperor lords as his servants. It was simply against the rules. There was actually such a terrifying existence in this world. The emperor lord was already the strongest person in the universe. However, this person had taken the emperor lord as his servant. No, many people even thought that he wasn't taking the emperor lord as his servant. Instead, he was creating the emperor lord. The process had started a long time ago because the Kurfürst Road had existed since a long time ago. Nobody knew how many years of history it had been since the beginning of his plan. It was really a big game of chess. What was his plot? What did he want to do? Many people asked this question in their hearts. They couldn't help but feel extremely horrified when they thought of this. Such a person, such a scheming mind, and the shocking strength of the real body were indeed worthy of the word terrifying that Yi Shiwen mentioned. Even I didn't expect that the Emperor Qin would appear first and then you. However, it doesn't matter. You will die soon, and your emperor's body will also be used by me. At that time, the universe will also fall into my control, and the effect will be the same, said the figure coldly. The eyes that looked at Yi Shiwen were incomparably cold. Want to kill me? You're not qualified, said Yi Shiwen indifferently. You couldn't kill the Emperor Qin back then. You can't kill me today either. Let me kill all your representatives in this world. Wishful thinking. That figure sneered and moved in an instant. His hands suddenly stretched out like a jade. It seemed as if his real body had moved. A huge crack was torn open between the heaven and the earth. Then, it directly slapped down towards Yi Shiwen. A pinnacle confrontation began in an instant. This blow directly cut through the eternal peace, as if the scene of the rebirth of heaven and earth was replayed. It was incomparably domineering. There was nothing else but to directly slap Yi Shiwen to death. The breathtaking degree of this blow had already surpassed everyone's understanding of the Great Way. Even the most discerning person could see how terrifying this blow was. It shook the universe and was invincible. With the strength of the Overlord who had just entered the second realm, the realm of this person was really deep to an unimaginable level. Even the Ice Emperor, who was also an emperor, was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He was completely shocked. Martial Emperor Seal, 3,000 martial arts. Yi Shiwen formed a seal with both hands. Above his head, the martial Emperor Seal began to spin, as if it had instantly formed 3,000 martial arts, forming a terrifying torrent of martial arts, directly smashing down. This blow seemed to penetrate the entire universe. Countless great ways turned into talismans and moved in all directions. Boom! 2 terrifying attacks bloomed in an instant. Dazzling divine light collided and burned fiercely. The chanting of the Heart Sutra resounded, becoming eternal. It had been a long time since such a high-level battle had taken place between the heavens and earth. Although Mingdi had the cultivation of the fourth realm, he couldn't even defeat Yi Shiwen, who was at the second realm, after being seriously injured. He was no match for Yi Shiwen at all. This blow was defeated in an instant, but the next wave of attacks was launched in an instant. On that jade-like palm, a long saber with simple patterns carved on it appeared. As the saber slashed down, the nomological laws of the saber slashed down, splitting the universe. Not only was the space split in half, but even time itself was split in half. It could be said that it was a feat that shocked the long river of history. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. This person in front of him was even more terrifying than he had expected. It was simply too frightening. Time was an invisible existence. Even Yi Shiwen, who had an extremely thorough understanding of time, could only use it in an invisible stage. However, this saber slashed down and was actually able to split time in half. It was clear that this person had an extremely thorough understanding of time. It was not an exaggeration to say that this person's strength was unparalleled. Fortunately, this was only a clone. If the real body was here, Yi Shiwen would have been suppressed almost without any suspense. Clang! A clanging sound could be heard. On Yi Shiwen's body, the time robe directly soared into the sky and set up a time array, protecting Yi Shiwen within it. At the same time, Yi Shiwen also let out a long roar. With the Avicii sword in his left hand and the martial emperor seal in his right, he rushed up with unimaginably dazzling divine light. Facing such a strong opponent, Yi Shiwen's battle intent was also burning to the extreme. Chapter 2996. Boom! This was the first time they had clashed with their full strength, yet it had already set off the most terrifying explosion in the world. It was as if the scene of heaven and earth being reborn had been recreated in this collision. Earth, fire, water, and wind, all of them had been reunited and evolved in this battle. This was a battle that transcended time and space. It was the strongest collision in the entire universe. An extraterrestrial powerhouse and the strongest powerhouse in the universe collided. The strength of that person was unfathomable. He dared to enter a sovereign emperor's body and was able to exert strength far beyond his own. This was the most terrifying thing. Yi Shiwen had also recovered to his peak. The elegance of the world's strongest person was revealed again. He was not inferior to him. Boom! 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 The battle between the two erupted at a speed of thousands of times per second. The battle was almost evenly matched. Both of them were extremely tyrannical. Even the heavenly way was directly drawn out. In the sky, the eye of the heavenly way reappeared. The heavenly way did not have spiritual wisdom. It would not intervene in the affairs of the world. However, the battle between the two had already made the creatures in the world feel fear, helplessness, and terror. Under such circumstances, the heavenly way, the incarnation of the will of all living beings, finally reappeared. It did not directly intervene in the battle between the two. It was just that the battlefield of the two was completely reinforced so that the two could no longer casually launch destructive attacks. But even so, the battle between the two still caused the world to collapse. It was still a ghastly sight. This battle shocked the world. It was destined to be written in the long river of history. It could almost be said to be a battle between the strongest powerhouses in the world. The fierceness and tragedy made everyone's spirit tremble. Yi Shiwen's aura was still rising. The acupoints all over his body opened one after another, absorbing all the essence of heaven and earth. His martial power was increasing every moment. It was like a bottomless sea. On the other side, the battle of that person was also like a peerless, fierce person. The more he fought, the stronger he became. It was terrifying. This person is so strong. He is the strongest among the many sovereign emperors I have seen, Yemo said with narrowed eyes. Although he was only a peak quasi-emperor, he was no stranger to the matters between emperor monarchs. He was well aware of the difference in strength between sovereigns. To forcefully descend and possess a sovereign lord like this, even if the sovereign lord had become an emperor through trickery, he was still a sovereign lord. Moreover, the sovereign lord was already a second realm expert. There was naturally no need to mention the dangers involved. Not to mention, he was still able to display strength that far surpassed the tyrant emperor's original strength. Even now, he did not show the slightest sign of fatigue, completely unlike someone who had just taken over the tyrant emperor. What was even more frightening was that he saw that this man was using a matchless devil technique. He was swallowing the world's essence to replenish his own consumption. This was so that he wouldn't be exhausted to death in this battle with Yi Shiwen. To be able to do this, even his previous master, the Demon Lord, who was extremely powerful, would not have been able to do this. Even if he didn't come in person, he was already very terrifying. This was also why Yi Shiwen was so afraid of him. He had to lure him out and eradicate him. It was unknown how many times such a person had instigated turmoil in the heavens and realms. He was a huge threat to the heavens and realms. The incident during the Qin Emperor's era had already clearly proved many things. This person was definitely not willing to just stay behind the scenes. In the end, he would definitely make a move to stir up trouble. Such a future trouble must be eradicated. Die! The figure burst out with a loud roar. A blow broke through the sky. Countless spiritual energies rushed out from the top of his head, turned into an eternal brilliance, and slammed down. This was a secret technique that Yi Shiwen had never seen before. In fact, it was a secret technique that had never appeared before. It directly attacked with the essence of the Great Way. It did not seem like the martial arts in the myriad worlds. The opponent had lurked in the myriad worlds for countless years. He had a very deep understanding of the martial arts and magical powers in the myriad worlds. However, Yi Shiwen did not have a particular understanding of the means of that person. Only this kind of means? From today onwards, your ambitions will be broken here. Yi Shiwen was indifferent. Endless brilliance burst out from his body, and he blasted out a punch. Yi Shiwen had smashed the opponent's attack with a single punch. Or, it could be said that Yi Shiwen had an amazing understanding of the opponent's methods. Wherever his fist passed, all the attacks were completely dissolved. This punch did not reduce its momentum, and directly blasted on the opponent's chest. Bang! The opponent was almost directly blasted without any defense. A mouthful of blood sprayed 30,000 miles, as if the entire universe was dyed red. Impossible! The person's eyes widened a little. It seemed that he never expected Yi Shiwen to be able to resolve the attack with a punch. Yes, it was directly resolving the attack. This was not forcibly blocking the opponent's attack, but Yi Shiwen had fundamentally understood the opponent's means of attack, and then completely resolved the opponent's means of attack. This was only possible if one had a certain level of understanding of the opponent's means. He had never fought with Yi Shiwen with his own means before. How could Yi Shiwen understand to this extent so quickly? Is it because of the attack just now? The person suddenly remembered that Yi Shiwen had taken many of his attacks just now. It was only at that time that Yi Shiwen might have come into contact with his means. He figured everything out at once. He figured out why Yi Shiwen could actually see through his means. But even so, this terrifying speed made him suddenly horrified. How long had it been since he fought just now? Yi Shiwen could actually see through his means. The cultivation system that was completely different from the myriad worlds, but in such a short time, Yi Shiwen had actually understood it to this extent. Is he a monster? Even with his experience, he had seen countless geniuses in the long ambush of the myriad worlds. However, at this point, it was impossible to see through his martial arts so easily. This speed shocked him. Although he had been paying attention to the myriad heavens world, the myriad heavens world was not a place without a master. If he wanted to intervene in the affairs of the myriad heavens world, he would have to go through the heavenly Tao. Although Yi Shiwen was originally on his list because of the obstruction of the heavenly way, he could only pay attention to him once in a period of time. This should have been a very short time, but Yi Shiwen actually became a big deal. When he first paid attention to Yi Shiwen, he was just a small character in a corner. The second time when he paid attention to the situation of the myriad worlds through the layers of crystal walls, it was already Yi Shiwen becoming an emperor. He decisively took action, but in the end, he still couldn't stop Yi Shiwen from becoming an emperor. When he looked at the myriad worlds for the third time, it was just a mere 20,000 years, but the situation had changed. Yi Shiwen had already ruled the myriad worlds, and he was not someone that the chess pieces that he had buried could deal with. If Yi Shiwen hadn't exposed his shortcomings this time and exposed such a weak state, the heavenly way would not have taken action. In the end, he didn't expect that this was actually a trap set by Yi Shiwen. He was forced to this point, and all of this turned out to be the opponent's deliberate plan. Who was he? He was actually schemed by a junior who had become an emperor through the Heart Sutra. When he thought of this, he was furious. What surprised him even more was the opponent's speed of comprehension, which simply surpassed anyone that he knew. In such a short time, Yi Shiwen already knew everything like the back of his hand. Such a future trouble must not be left alive. The person looked at Yi Shiwen's eyes, which were full of mournful killing intent. First, Emperor Qin, then Martial Emperor. Both of them proclaimed themselves emperors one after another, and smashed his layout in the myriad worlds. One slaughtered 5 of his emperors, and the other slaughtered 4 of his emperors. When he thought of it, his heart was bleeding. Last time, he allowed Emperor Qin to grow, which made him regret until now. Now, he absolutely couldn't allow a martial emperor to grow. That person was full of killing intent towards Yi Shiwen, but at the same time, Yi Shiwen's killing intent towards this person was also extremely great. You only know now? But it's too late. Yi Shiwen sneered. Just now, he forcibly took the opponent's attack, just for this moment. As the saying goes, know yourself, know your enemy, and you will always be victorious. In this short time, he had already understood the opponent's methods. Of course, it was not to the extent of seeing through everything at a glance. After all, the opponent was also an expert at the emperor level, and even more powerful than him. But it was enough for him to make a certain judgment. Yi Shiwen's attack did not stop at all. After the successful attack, the next wave of attack was launched almost immediately. Above his head, the martial emperor's seal was spinning. Bang! This attack suddenly fell on that person's body. That person let out a muffled groan, and his whole body instantly flew out. Bang! 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 Yi Shiwen's series of attacks, like a storm, fell on his body crazily. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this. Such a violent attack, if any of them fell on their body, was enough to shatter their world. But how terrifying would it be for such an attack to land on a single person in succession? Everyone could only see countless principles fluttering in the air. These principles transformed into an azure dragon, a phoenix, a black tortoise, and a vermilion bird in an instant. It seemed as if the 4 spirits that guarded the heavens and 10,000 worlds had completely manifested under Yi Shiwen's control. Some people had already understood that Yi Shiwen was suppressing his opponent with the power of the heavens and realms. He was the reigning emperor, and this was his ability. Even the heavens would allocate a part of its power to him, so that he could suppress all his opponents. So even the 4 spirits of heaven and earth appeared for Yi Shiwen's use. Chapter 2997. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen's battle prowess had risen to the peak. He had unleashed a series of critical strikes. Even the Ice Emperor was left dumbstruck. He was scared witless. After all, he would have died if he were to face such an attack. So, all Yi Shiwen's preparation just now was for this attack. Ice Emperor suddenly understood. Even from the very beginning, when Yi Shiwen took the opponent's attack head-on, he had already been planning this matter. Such scheming and calculation ability. How could he not be terrified? He admitted that he could not calculate to such an extent. The two of them were way too horrifying. If it was possible, the Ice Empress would have the urge to run far away from them right now. They were simply monsters. Even someone like her, who had already stepped into the monarch state, was shocked by this scene. One could well imagine that if it were anyone else, they would have been scared to death. I am a reigning emperor realm, and you are just a small fry, Yi Shiwen said while attacking indifferently. His attack did not give any time to breathe. In terms of strength, he might not be able to win if he really fought with that person. So, he could only seize this opportunity that he created this time to seriously injure the opponent in one fell swoop. Otherwise, would this battle last for tens of thousands of years? He had already seen that the opponent had a kind of reverse method that could devour the essence of heaven and earth in the myriad worlds to support his battle. Fighting a war of attrition with him was not the most suitable choice. Roar! That person roared angrily. His body burst into a dazzling light, and he forcibly broke away from Yi Shiwen's attack. In an instant, he leaped half of the universe to avoid Yi Shiwen's attack. His whole body had been shattered. Although he could erupt with combat power far beyond an overlord, his physical body was still an overlord after all. He was only in the second realm. Facing the crazy attack of a third realm master like Yi Shiwen, it was already extremely difficult for him to be able to hold on until now. It was the first time he was in such a difficult situation. Last time, it was just a wisp of divine sense controlling the Emperor corpse. In fact, it was nothing at all. This time, he seriously planned to eradicate Yi Shiwen, but in fact, he was slapped in the face. Throughout his life, he had always schemed against others. However, he had never expected that he would be ruthlessly schemed against by Yi Shiwen. This was what it meant to scheme against an unsuspecting person. What he didn't expect was that Yi Shiwen had been secretly plotting against him ever since he knew of his existence. The one with the most schemes wins. This was the rule since ancient times. Even with his status, it was impossible to change this rule. Yi Shiwen, I must kill you. I must kill you. That person roared like an injured wild beast. His eyes were scarlet red, as if they were mystical and could actually cause the space around him to distort violently. Kill me? I'm afraid you won't be able to do it in your current condition. Yi Shiwen's expression was still indifferent, but he didn't rush forward. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, If I'm not wrong, you are Emperor Hunyuan. When the figure heard Yi Shiwen's words, his body trembled uncontrollably, and a bit of astonishment flashed across his expression. Seeing this scene, Yi Shiwen already understood in his heart. Sure enough, this person was actually Emperor Primordius. He was also the person whom the demon monarch had always wanted to kill. The person who had plotted against the demon monarch, including the many emperors that the demon monarch had cultivated. It was simply unimaginable how much trouble he had stirred up over the years. After confirming the identity of this person, Yi Shiwen didn't feel relaxed at all. On the contrary, he became even more dignified. He couldn't estimate the strength of the Demon King in the past, but now he could see that the Demon King was at least in existence above the fifth realm. However, such a level of expert had actually died in the hands of Emperor Hunyuan. In other words, Emperor Hunyuan was at least an expert of the fifth realm. He was even more terrifying than the previous Mingdi. He was the most terrifying expert that Yi Shiwen had encountered so far. I didn't expect a junior like you to have actually heard of my name. That person saw that Yi Shiwen clearly knew his name, so he generously admitted it. Many people felt a little dizzy when they heard this. What kind of existence was Emperor Primordius? Why hadn't they heard of him before? Especially the Ice Emperor. He had lived for such a long time, but he didn't understand Emperor Primordius at all. He didn't know who he was. The only thing he knew was that Emperor Primordius was very strong and terrifying. It's really him, Yemo said while gritting his teeth. As the spirit of the Tao tool that followed the Demon King back then, how could he not know all of this? Even his body, the Tianyuan mirror, was shattered in the hands of Emperor Hunyuan. Given the sturdiness of Tao artifacts, even ordinary sovereign emperors would not be able to destroy them. However, in that battle, the Tianyuan mirror had already shattered in all directions, and he had barely been sent away by the demon monarch. Otherwise, Kong Tian's primordial spirit would have been completely destroyed, and not even a speck of it would have been left behind. Who is he? Yi Qianqian asked. He is a sinister and cunning person. You have to be careful. He is a very sinister person. It is difficult for an emperor to launch a sneak attack. However, it doesn't matter to him. He doesn't care about his reputation. He will do such a thing. Yemo barely calmed down his breathing and said, now he finally saw the enemy in his life. Although it was just a clone of the opponent, it was enough to arouse all of his anger. At this time, he couldn't help it all because he was just a quasi-emperor. The gap between a quasi-emperor and an emperor couldn't be calculated with reason. At this time, the gap was even bigger, and the more obvious it was. Don't think that you have a good reputation. I also didn't expect that you would personally go into battle, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. He finally confirmed in his heart that this person who had fought with the Emperor of Qin many times was the Emperor Hunyuan who had killed the Demon King. There was no record of the Emperor Hunyuan, even in the martial sect. The Emperor of Qin also kept his mouth shut about this person. The only time he mentioned him, he only said that he was very strong, very strong. At that time, the Emperor of Qin was already at the peak of his power. But he still had such an evaluation. It could be seen how terrifying the Emperor Hunyuan was. Yes, those dogs you raise are more useless than the other. If you don't go into battle yourself, then what can you do? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. The only thing I am curious about is why you want to build the Kurfürst Road. What do you want to find in the heavens? Yi Shiwen's words could be said to be mean, but the Emperor Hunyuan didn't get angry. He knew that Yi Shiwen was provoking him to make him lose his composure. He could still see it clearly, but his heart was still burning with anger. What I want to find is not something you are qualified to know. As soon as Emperor Primordial Chaos Emperor's words left his mouth, he immediately reacted. The more he spoke, the more likely it was to slip up. If Yi Shiwen was still unable to discern his purpose in the myriad heavens realms, then it was obvious now. He simply confessed without being pressed, telling Yi Shiwen that he was looking for something in the myriad heavens realms. He took a deep look at Yi Shiwen. This young emperor was very difficult to deal with and terrifying. He was definitely not an ordinary person. It was not easy to deal with such a person. As I expected, Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, he was not a 3-year-old child. Of course, he would not believe that the fundamental reason for those great demon kings who wanted to destroy the world might be because they had nothing better to do. Not to mention that it was impossible for a character at the emperor level to do such a boring thing. There must be a special reason for it. Originally, Yi Shiwen thought that the other party wanted to kill the emperor kings that appeared in the heavens, but later he found that it was not entirely correct. Because the Kurfürst Road had existed for a long time, and it was not always an era without an emperor. Moreover, it was not so easy to kill an emperor king, especially a powerful emperor king. The Emperor Qin was almost crippled after being besieged once, and the other party never appeared again after that, let alone hunting the geniuses of the various races who had the qualifications to become emperor. From this point, it could be seen that something was wrong, and he was just bluffing, and the result was that he really bluffed something. But then he was a little confused. What was in the heavens that made the other party start planning countless years ago? You are too nosy. Those who know too much will die faster. Don't you know this truth? The Emperor Hunyuan stared at Yi Shiwen and said, that's not necessarily true. With your strength, it's simply impossible for you to cover the sky with one hand in a myriad of worlds. Yi Shiwen sneered slightly. Do you think I don't know the reason why you are still talking to me is to buy time to heal your injuries? But I am afraid you have not really understood that in the heavens, this is my home field, my territory. Even if I let you recover to your peak, it will be useless. What a ridiculous confidence. The blood on the Emperor Hunyuan's body had almost disappeared, and his injuries were also recovering at an astonishing speed. You have that kind of stupid and ridiculous confidence like him. Like him? Who is it? Emperor Qin? That's an honor. As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, everyone discovered that he had already rushed to the front of Emperor Primordial Chaos at some unknown time. Boom! Countless laws of heaven and earth waved, turning into the 4 spirits of heaven and earth, and directly suppressed. Puff! The Emperor Hunyuan's body suddenly burst open with countless wounds, and before he could recover, his body collapsed again. So, the one who really doesn't understand the situation is you. Chapter 2998. Under Yi Shiwen's control, the 4 spirits of heaven and earth began to bloom with blazing immortal light, as if they had pierced through the world, bringing with them an indescribably terrifying power of the law. The power of heaven and earth was mobilized to the extreme by Yi Shiwen in an instant, and it rushed towards Emperor Primordial Chaos. You want to kill me? Impossible! Emperor Primordius bellowed. A mysterious law emerged from his body and formed a giant armor that protected him. His expression was filled with unparalleled self-confidence, as if there was no one in this world who had the ability to kill him, and Yi Shiwen was just making him a police officer. That's all. What kind of talisman is this? Why have I never seen it before? Ice Emperor looked at the talisman that emerged on Emperor Primordial Chaos in shock. He was an emperor, so he could naturally see through everything. This was a brand new cultivation system that he had never come into contact with before. These talismans protected him, propping up a small world, and collided with the four spirits of heaven and earth that pounced on him. The collision between the two caused incomparably dazzling light to sweep out, and the flower of Tao was blooming, as if countless gods with profound cultivation were chanting the scriptures of the great Tao that had been passed down since ancient times. The collision between the two seemed to reverse the river of time, and there was a terrifying power dancing in the sky. Bang! A huge roar sounded, and the small world on Emperor Primordial Chaos's body was directly blasted apart, unable to stop the four spirits of heaven and earth from wreaking havoc. In this aspect, the four spirits of heaven and earth displayed a terrifying destructive power. This is heaven's will to destroy you. Yi Shiwen's expression was incomparably cold, and he chased up to Emperor Primordial Chaos in one step and launched a punch with the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. This punch was straight and unparalleled, and there was no turning back at all. In Yi Shiwen's hands, this punch was almost the most unparalleled fist technique in the world. Boom! Yi Shiwen's punch directly smashed into Emperor Primordial Chaos's small world, destroying a world with one punch. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw this. This was a great battle that transcended time and space inside and outside the heavens. However, it was a pity that this wasn't a true battle of the pinnacle. After all, Yi Shiwen hadn't grown to the pinnacle yet. Moreover, that person hadn't come with his true body. Both of them were extremely rare, peerless geniuses. Yi Shiwen had single-handedly pacified the chaos of the heavenly race. His meritorious service was unparalleled. Now he was the strongest expert in the 10,000 worlds. The number of emperors who had died in his hands was not small. Those were emperors, not cabbages that could be found on the roadside. On the other hand, the other party had already made arrangements in the heavens countless years ago. Their schemes were profound, and their strength made Yi Shiwen even more vigilant. If it was a battle between the two at the peak, just how eye-catching would it be? It would be just too shocking, enough to shake up endless generations and make all of the heavenly geniuses before and after lose their colors. After penetrating Emperor Huanyuan's microcosm, the momentum of Yi Shiwen's punch didn't diminish. It directly blasted into Emperor Huanyuan's chest on the spot. Even with the protection of that mysterious talisman, Emperor Huanyuan's sternum was still shattered by Yi Shiwen's punch. If it weren't for the talisman's protection, this punch would have been enough to pierce through him and even take his life. Yi Shiwen's aura was getting stronger and stronger. After breaking through to the third realm, the martial power in his body began to rise crazily, almost uncontrollably. "You can't kill me." Emperor Huanyuan looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. "Really? Do you really think that you have an immortal body?" Yi Shiwen turned his hand, took out a yellow middle plum, and put it into his mouth. Yi Shiwen's martial power, which had been somewhat exhausted because of the series of attacks, immediately recovered by 70 to 80%. In fact, it was still rising. Imperial Monarch Huanyuan couldn't help but sigh emotionally when he saw this scene. Yellow middle plum. Even with my experience, I've never obtained a chaotic divine treasure like this. Yet you've actually obtained it. In the myriad of worlds, you really are blessed by the heavens and have obtained the favor of the heavens. So, you have no chance of winning at all. Today, you will die here. Even if it's just a clone, it can't let you escape. Yi Shiwen was very clear about his opponent's means and how terrifying he was. If such a person was allowed to escape, then the troubles in the future would really be endless. Whoosh! In Yi Shiwen's hand, the Avicii sword bloomed with a dazzling sword light, directly turning into a bloody hell that soared into the sky. That kind of terrifying power made people tremble. Yi Shiwen's power also increased to the extreme. This sword cut through the sky. Poochie! Emperor Hunyuan wanted to dodge, but it was useless. Yi Shiwen had sealed the space around him in one move, so he couldn't dodge this attack at all. He could only watch this sword ruthlessly stab into his chest. The long sword was stained with blood. This was Emperor's blood. For cultivators, any drop of this blood was a great tonic, like a heavenly treasure. The drop of blood dripped down along the sword hilt. Yi Shiwen noticed that there was not much vitality in the blood of Emperor Hunyuan. One must know that even if an emperor had died for countless years, his physical body still had vitality left. For ordinary people, at most their spirit would die, but their physical bodies were already indestructible. And now, there was not much vitality in the blood flowing in the Overlord's body. It was conceivable that in order to fight against Yi Shiwen, Emperor Hunyuan had pushed the Overlord's physical body to the extent that it was simply terrifying. And this lost vitality was supporting Emperor Hunyuan's heaven-defying combat power. Obviously, Emperor Hunyuan regarded the Overlord as a consumable. A dignified emperor was going to die in such an unclear way. How sad was it? As Yi Shiwen began to refine the yellow middle plum in his body, a monstrous sea of martial power began to sweep through his physical body, using the yellow middle plum to restore the martial power in his body. Only Yi Shiwen, who also controlled the yellow middle plum, could do such an extravagant act. Boom! 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 Although Emperor Hunyuan had lost most of his martial power under the suppression of the world, and was also completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen, it was almost impossible to say who could completely suppress the other. The battle between the two, in the blink of an eye, had lasted for 20 hours. The battle between the two in the universe had entered a white-hot stage. Both sides were dripping with blood, and it was impossible to know whether it was their blood or the others. Or it was simply meaningless. Everyone found that they could no longer understand the confrontation between the two. Martial arts were completely integrated into the laws. Every raise of a hand or a lift of a foot was suppressing the opponent with the power of the world. In this aspect, Yi Shiwen, who belonged to the Emperor Hunyuan, had a natural advantage. He had the blessing of the world, and Emperor Hunyuan was an outsider, so he would instinctively be suppressed by the world. Therefore, even the four spirits of heaven and earth would appear from time to time for Yi Shiwen to use and fight for him. At this time, Emperor Hunyuan could mobilize the power of the world far less than Yi Shiwen, so he could only organize a small world to contend with the pressure of the world. This is a self-created world? Even Yi Shiwen had never seen such a secret technique. Although he had claimed to have a divine kingdom before, his divine kingdom was far from this powerful. This wasn't a virtual divine kingdom, because he had keenly discovered that this world of imperial monarch Primordius was actually a projection of the real world. Because his true body wasn't present, he couldn't truly manifest that world. Gods began to establish a divine kingdom, but the divine kingdom was not a real world, nor was it a real world. Most divine kingdoms would collapse with the fall of the gods, but the real world was different. It did not need the support of divine power. Even if the Emperor Hunyuan or the gods fell, it could still exist. This was equivalent to carrying the power of a world with him. No wonder he could enter the heavens and resist the pressure of the heavenly laws in the heavens and the heavens. Yi Shiwen was figuring out the method of forming this world. If he could use it, then Yi Shiwen's combat power would be improved by another level. He did not have to worry about the difference between being in the position or not. He was the greatest master of his world. In the void of the universe, everywhere was filled with the golden blood of both sides, floating in the void. Everyone knew that any drop of blood was enough to penetrate the world and had incredible power. And the fight between the two gradually came to an end. Yi Shiwen continued to break the body of Emperor Hunyuan. No matter how Emperor Hunyuan struggled, he had no chance of winning in front of Yi Shiwen, who had raised his strength to the extreme. In other words, this was not his real body, and he could not truly exert his strength. "It's over here!" Yi Shiwen let out a long roar, and the sword aura of the Avicii sword in his hand pierced through the sky, bringing the final blow, fiercely bombarding the body of Emperor Hunyuan. Boom! Boundless chaos, time, space, everything was annihilated. A terrifying force engulfed the primordious Empyrean Lord. The primordious spirit that descended on the Overlord's body finally dispersed. And most of the Overlords had already died. Even if they were both Emperor Hunyuan in a collision of this level, he was just cannon fodder. Yi Shiwen, you can actually see through my power of the world. You are really not simple, but we will meet again. The next time we meet, it will be the time to take your life. As soon as the voice fell, the spirit that Emperor Hunyuan had attached to the body of the Overlord had completely dispersed. After beheading this matchless enemy, Yi Shiwen's aura also converged, and he walked in the universe, storing the body of the Overlord into his inner space. Just by looking at him, one would think that he was a person who did not cultivate. But Ice Emperor in the distance knew that it was not that Yi Shiwen had lost his strength. On the contrary, he had entered a whole new realm, a realm that even he could not see through. Chapter 29:99. Isn't this progress a little too fast? Ice Emperor had lived for countless years and had seen countless geniuses and terrifying figures. However, there were not many who progressed as fast as Yi Shiwen. Thank you, Ice Emperor, for your help. Yi Shiwen walked in front of Ice Emperor and cupped his hands. No need to thank me. I didn't do anything. Ice Emperor was a little embarrassed after hearing Yi Shiwen's words. From the beginning to the end, it was as if he had watched a great battle. However, he did not help much. He also saw that Yi Shiwen had a well-thought-out plan in this battle. Whether he came out or not, he could not change the final outcome. In other words, it was useless for him to be a bystander for a few chapters. His only role was to help Yi Shiwen in the formation. However, in the end, he was only there to help. Although he helped to stabilize the aftermath of the battle, the heavenly way came out first. Then, there was Yi Shiwen's array in the divine court. There was not much impact at all. Moreover, he also gained a lot from this battle. It was not easy to see a battle between emperors of this level. Therefore, Yi Shiwen's gratitude made him feel a little embarrassed. I am very grateful that you helped me, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Of course, this battle had long been within his calculations. The final result would not be affected even if Ice Emperor was not there. The only trouble was that the whole process might become more troublesome. Since the matter here is over, I will leave first, said Ice Emperor, facing Yi Shiwen. Even if Yi Shiwen's aura was like an ordinary person, he still felt a huge pressure, especially when he saw Yi Shiwen kill so many emperors in one breath. He could not help but feel a chill on his back. The so-called legend of emperors being indestructible was only a legend after all. The road of emperors was just a stop on the long journey. Of course, he had gained a lot from this battle. He needed to go back and have a good retreat to digest it. Then, I won't send you off. Yi Shiwen looked at Ice Emperor's figure gradually disappearing in the starry sky. He smiled a little. He stopped all magical powers and fell into the depths of the divine court. This battle was not only for Ice Emperor, but also for himself. Moreover, he still needed to consolidate the realm that he had just broken through. Therefore, Yi Shiwen immediately went into closed-door training after the battle. The myriad heavens and myriad realms had sunk into a shocking frenzy because of Yi Shiwen's battle. The experts of the myriad heavens and myriad realms wouldn't have known that there were so many emperor-level experts hidden in the myriad heavens and myriad realms if it weren't for Yi Shiwen's battle. Originally, during the chaos of the Tian clan, they had thought that there were no longer any monarchs in this world. Now, it seemed that they had been thinking too much. Moreover, what surprised everyone even more was the strength of Emperor Primordius. It was simply unfathomable. Not only had he nurtured 9 emperor monarchs and made them his servants, even if Yi Shiwen had destroyed it now, it was merely a soul clone of his, and his vitality wasn't damaged at all. The existence of such a terrifying figure in the world was a huge threat. Moreover, this battle made many people realize that from now on, it would be the era of the sovereign monarchs. If one didn't become a sovereign monarch, he would only be an ant in the end. He He would never be able to raise his head in front of the sovereign monarchs. Another function was to let everyone confirm Yi Shiwen's strength once again and establish his eternal and inextinguishable majesty. Even if they were all emperor monarchs and would enter the era of emperor monarchs in the future, he would still be the leader among the many emperor monarchs. No one could shake him. What scared many far-sighted people even more was that this world was far from just one world. On the other side of the endless chaos, there was at least another world. Where did those emperor monarchs who had disappeared for generations go? In the past, everyone had some guesses, but they didn't really confirm it. However, the appearance of this Emperor Primordius, the name that had never been heard before, and the completely different cultivation system seemed to have confirmed one point, that there was another world outside the heavens, and they weren't the most unique existence. For the Emperor Monarchs, cultivation was all about the perception of the Great Way. The difference in the cultivation system wasn't actually that big because their essence was to cultivate the Great Way. However, for those below the Emperor Monarchs, the completely different cultivation system represented two completely different kinds of great ways. The most worrying thing was that it seemed that compared to the outside world, the heavens wasn't the strongest existence. At least, the strongest martial emperors in the heavens didn't seem to have the upper hand when facing Emperor Primordius. Yi Shiwen had stopped the invasion this time. But what about the next time? On the other hand, some of the eternal imperial monarchs were already considering a deeper question, and that was exactly what Imperial Monarch Primordius wanted to find in the universe. It was even to the extent that he had spared no expense to place imperial monarchs as pawns in the universe countless years ago. His intentions were so great that it was unimaginable. Although they didn't know the real intention of Emperor Primordius, they still understood one principle very well. And that was the principle that a man's wealth would arouse the envy of others. If there was really something that made such a terrifying character drool, then it was definitely not a good thing for the heavens. And the heavenly clan was definitely not the only external threat. This discovery also made many people start to worry about gains and losses. It was like the mentality of humans on Earth when they first realized that they weren't the most unique existence in the universe. But in any case, Yi Shiwen still managed to suppress this storm this time. The legend of the martial emperor's strength once again spread in the heavens and the 10,000 worlds. For a time, martial emperor Yi Shiwen could be said to be in the limelight. Yi Shiwen, who was in closed-door cultivation, didn't know about these things. In other words, he didn't need to care about these things at all. For him, consolidating his current cultivation was the most important thing. Moreover, the cultivation system of Emperor Primordius was also completely different from the system of the heavens, which also made him very interested. He immediately immersed himself in research. In the blink of an eye, another 1,000 years passed in a flash. In these 1,000 years, Yi Shiwen didn't even take a step out of the divine court. He was immersed in sorting out his understanding of the path of Emperor Primordius. In the 300th year, he sorted out a set of cultivation system of the mythological era. This set of cultivation system was somewhat related to the current cultivation system, but it was completely different from the current situation where martial arts were the main focus. It mainly focused on the cultivation of magical powers. In the end, one would become an innate god. It was different from the current gods. It was the ancient god system that was once glorious in the mythological era. After sorting out this set of things, Yi Shiwen immediately released the ancient gods cultivation method to the whole world so that everyone could perceive it, especially those who were born with the ancient gods bloodline. When they saw this cultivation system, it was as if they had obtained a priceless treasure. One must know that although they originally had the innate magical powers left by the ancient gods in their bodies, or the innate bloodline of the ancient gods flowing in their bodies, there was no way to really awaken the innate magical powers in a systematic way. Even if it was awakened, they mostly relied on instinct to cultivate. There was no set of sustainable cultivation methods. This was the fundamental reason why the ancient gods' cultivation system was declining in the current world. Because they didn't have a systematic cultivation method. There was no way to support such a huge cultivation system by relying on the inspiration of one or two people. However, Yi Shiwen was different. After comprehending the Taoist robe left behind in the mythological era. He had a very deep understanding of the cultivation system of the mythological era. Even archaeologists didn't understand it as well as he did. It was a different path from the current one. At his level, he could already see through the essence of the Great Way at a glance. For ordinary people, the innate magical powers of the ancient gods, including the ability to control the laws and elements, were inconceivable. However, Yishuan had already seen through everything and saw through the root of all this. Naturally, he could sort out a set of feasible cultivation system. Of course, the main reason was that the value of the Taoist robe itself was very high because it was left behind by the emperor. If it was just an ordinary relic of the mythological era, Yishuan wouldn't be able to reach this level. After sorting out the cultivation system of the ancient gods, he didn't put it aside. Instead, he spread it out so that this system could truly be passed down, so that the myriad heavens and realms could regain their glory, or even become stronger. Otherwise, with his cultivation, there was no need for him to sort out the cultivation system of the ancient gods. Some people were born unsuitable for the cultivation of martial arts, but they were very talented in the cultivation of the ancient divine powers. This also gave the world another choice and possibility. Most importantly, the appearance of the primordial Chaos Emperor had truly made him feel the threat of the outside world. It was imperative that he improve the strength of the myriad heavens realms. Yishuan's actions had also won him a lot of praise, especially from the ancient gods' bloodline clans and forces that were on the verge of decline. They were almost relying on their instincts to cultivate. Their starting point was very high. They started by controlling the laws to cultivate. However, because of this, in fact, most people couldn't even pass the threshold of entry. They could only switch to the martial arts that had a very low threshold. Now that Yishuan had spread the ancient gods' cultivation system, it was equivalent to helping them remove the threshold. One could imagine how pleasant it was for them. Therefore, in just a few hundred years after Yishuan spread the ancient gods' cultivation system, many races and forces with the bloodline of the ancient gods had risen. Among them, there were even more masters. Although they still couldn't compete with the huge martial arts cultivation system, they were already a force that couldn't be ignored. Chapter 3000. It turned out that it was not without reason that these sentient life forms had once ruled the heavens and realms. Once there was a complete cultivation method, these life forms with the bloodline of the ancient gods would improve too quickly. For a time, it caused panic in the myriad worlds. After all, although people didn't know much about the mythological era, it didn't prevent them from learning from the ancient books about how the cruel sentient life forms of that era ruled over the myriad worlds. If it wasn't for unknown reasons, that era collapsed overnight. Perhaps everyone would still be under the rule of these sentient life forms. However, they soon discovered that everything was actually not that terrible. Although they had the bloodline of the ancient gods, they were not truly pure-blooded after all. So, their potential was not as terrifying as those ancient gods. Moreover, they still needed to cultivate martial arts to ensure their strength. It was just that they would still be much stronger than ordinary martial artists. However, the biggest problem was that compared to the martial arts cultivation method, which was like the vast stars, the ancient gods' cultivation system only had one path. Even the system that Yishuan had summarized was not suitable for everyone. This was also the reason why Yishuan had released the ancient gods' cultivation system. After all, the martial arts cultivation system was created by countless emperors. It was not something that could be achieved by one person. In the mythological era, there were more than one emperor who shone in that great era. So many people had created the system. If Yishuan were to complete it alone, the workload would undoubtedly be so huge that it would make him vomit blood. It was better to release it and let them slowly improve it later. Anyway, this was all he could do. It seemed that because he had reorganized a part of the ancient gods' cultivation system, the heavens also favored him. He found that his cultivation speed was also a lot faster. Soon, he had consolidated his cultivation and was firmly moving towards the peak of the third realm. However, this did not stop him. After he had sorted out a part of the ancient gods' cultivation system, he immersed himself in the research of the Emperor Huanyuan's cultivation system. This was a very majestic cultivation system. Yi Shiwen could feel that if it could be fully developed, it would not be smaller than the martial arts cultivation system. Of course, the part that Yi Shiwen had sorted out was not circulated because this was a cultivation method from a different world. It was not suitable for the heavens and realms. It would only be a disaster if it was circulated. He only used it as a reference. However, he did not want to let this part of the understanding disappear in vain. He still left a part of the understanding in the ancient books, but they were all shelved in the divine palace. It took Yi Shiwen 500 years to understand and use this cultivation system for reference. He finally sorted out some things and continued to deduce them through the mysterious space. He had a premonition that sooner or later, he would still encounter Emperor Huanyuan. When that day really came, it would be a life and death battle. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. He still understood this principle. The more he pondered at this time, the greater his chances of winning in the future. And in the remaining 200 years, Yi Shiwen did not comprehend these things. Instead, he devoted himself to practice. Not only did he completely consolidate the cultivation of the third realm, but he also faintly touched the edge of the peak of the third realm after swallowing the yellow plum. Even Yi Shiwen himself was startled by such cultivation progress. It was originally impossible. It had only been a few hundred years, but his progress was greater than that of an ordinary sovereign lord who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. However, Yi Shiwen quickly figured out that all of this was the heavens helping him. In other words, the heavens had bestowed merit to him, so that his path of cultivation would be smooth and without any obstacles. It should be to reward him for the reconstruction of the ancient gods' cultivation system. As expected, sharpening the axe would not delay the work of cutting firewood. Originally, Yi Shiwen only wanted to sort it out as a reference. In the end, it really made his cultivation more smooth. In this regard, Yi Shiwen could only say that the heavenly Tao was clear. The heavens saw everything. After 1,000 years, Yi Shiwen ended this 1,000-year closed-door training. As soon as he came out, Yi Mo came to find him. He looked at Yi Shiwen and said with a serious face, "Help me protect me. I want to cross the heavens' retribution." Yi Mo's expression was calm, but there was a bit of determination in it. There was also a hint of madness. He had followed two emperors. First was the Demon King, and then Yi Shiwen. He also had the cultivation system of both of them. However, he still had to walk a path that belonged only to him. This was the case for any emperor. Yi Shiwen was also the same. No matter what system he had learned before, he had to abandon it in the end. He had to sort out his own path again. Yi Mo had an advantage because of the existence of the Devil King and Yi Shiwen. However, this advantage had also become a shackle for him. He had finally gotten rid of this shackle more than 20,000 years after Yi Shiwen had become an emperor and was about to take that step. Yi Shiwen looked at Yi Mo. He knew that Yi Mo was a bit crazy now. In fact, Yi Shiwen, who had really experienced that step, understood that people who really wanted to take that step were all madmen. Because the final success rate was too low, maybe 1 in 100. Therefore, Yi Mo finally waited until Yi Shiwen came out of closed-door training. With Yi Shiwen protecting him, the success rate was naturally much higher. "All right," Yi Shiwen simply replied with this word. Then, the two of them crossed the Milky Way and entered a desolate Milky Way. They began to attract the heavens' retribution. Yi Shiwen just watched from afar and didn't intervene. The tribulation clouds in the sky were getting thicker. It was naturally not worth mentioning compared to the intensity of heaven's retribution that Yi Shiwen faced. However, it was still a lot stronger than Ice Emperor's. In terms of accumulation, Yi Mo could only be stronger than the Ice Empress. However, this also meant that Yi Mo's challenge was much harder than Ice Emperor's. The reappearance of heaven's retribution was also sensed by the entire universe. Many powerhouses woke up from closed-door training and hurried to the desolate galaxy. The endless tribulation clouds made their faces full of solemnity. After Ice Emperor, Yi Shiwen was the third person who tried to become an emperor in the universe after the confinement period. The first underworld lord and the second ice emperor both succeeded. However, this didn't mean that the success rate was very high. On the contrary, the success rate was still very small. Therefore, those who chose to cross the retribution were all lunatics. Who would dare to take the risk without preparation? Everyone soon found Yi Shiwen watching quietly from the side. They couldn't help but be envious. When Yi Mo crossed the retribution, Yi Shiwen could watch over him and protect him. What a great honor and opportunity it was. Just the fact that Yi Shiwen was personally watching over him increased his success rate by many times. Even a 1% increase in success rate might save his life in the Emperor's retribution. Everyone wanted to go and greet Yi Shiwen, but he stopped them. However, they didn't have time to worry, because heaven's retribution would fall soon. They didn't have much time to think. Walalala! Endless thunder tribulation descended and engulfed Yi Mo completely. No one could see what was happening. Everyone opened their magic eyes and could barely see the situation in heaven's retribution. Seeing this scene, everyone finally confirmed that Yi Shiwen's retribution was a rare and exotic way of crossing the retribution. Because Yi Mo's retribution was like the way of crossing the Emperor's retribution in everyone's impression. It was too miserable. It had just begun, but his body was split everywhere. Blood was flowing, and his flesh and bones were flying everywhere. His whole body was constantly in the process of being heavily injured and reconstructed. The only way to cross the retribution was to endure and display all of one's magical powers and everything one had learned to fight against the heavens. Yi Shiwen's domineering way of crossing the retribution, and even killing an Emperor Lord as soon as he finished crossing the retribution, was indeed a method that belonged to Yi Shiwen. Perhaps no one could be so tyrannical even after 1,000,000 years. Yi Mo was very miserable, but it was much better than the time when Yi Shiwen was crossing the heavenly tribulation. At that time, Yi Shiwen didn't have anything to rely on, but he not only had Tianyuan Mirror, but he also had the yellow plum, a heavenly treasure which was given to him by Yi Shiwen. Even if he was beaten black and blue by the thunder tribulation, and it seemed as if he would be struck to death in the next moment, he still tenaciously survived. This time, the retribution lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. During these 3 days and 3 nights, the number of times Yi Mo was in danger could be said to be as high as dozens. Almost if he was not careful, he might lose everything and die in the retribution. Everyone had a complete understanding of the horror of the Emperor's retribution for the first time. Because of the special case of Yi Shiwen, when the inverse emperor became the emperor, it was in the territory of the Tian clan. The place where the Ice Emperor became the emperor was also extremely hidden. Therefore, this was the first time for everyone to see someone crossing the retribution. It was simply a kind of torture. Those who could pass, it could be said to be crazy people who survived with a narrow chance of survival. But Yi Mo finally succeeded in crossing the retribution. Even if he was on the verge of death, he finally passed the retribution. He only needed a little time to completely transform into an emperor. If it was someone else, it would be very dangerous at this time because there were probably more than 1 or 2 people who wanted to kill an emperor. This was the time when an emperor was at his weakest. If they succeeded, they could even seize the emperor's Tao fruit and reach the heavens in 1 step. Therefore, they must find the safest place to become an emperor. However, under the situation where Yi Shiwen was protecting him, all these hidden dangers did not exist. In this world, who would dare to be presumptuous in front of Yi Shiwen? In this world, there was another demon emperor. Chapter 3001. Yi Mo had successfully crossed the tribulation and was known as Emperor Mo. There was another emperor in the world. This news caused a sensation in the heavens and realms. Compared to the previous 2 times, Yi Mo's success in crossing the tribulation was witnessed by everyone. Although Yi Mo's tragic situation of crossing the tribulation scared some people, it also stimulated some people's ambition and made them yearn for the emperor realm. This was the era of the emperor. Only the emperor could occupy a place in the chess of the world in the future and become a chess player. Otherwise, they could only become someone else's chess piece. And this was also the second emperor lord in the divine court after Yishuan. This significance could be said to be like a thunderclap that exploded in the heavens and myriad realms. Many people who thought that they knew the truth were shocked to the point of dizziness. Because since ancient times, apart from the Ji family, it seemed that only the ancient heavenly court had many emperors in the records. They had a glorious period. It was almost like a curse. Even among the martial arts sect who became emperor in the recent ancient times, there were no more emperors. Therefore, the Ji family was so special. Although the ancient heavenly court had declined for countless years, it still had amazing rallying power in the heavens and realms. It seemed that whether there was a second emperor or not had become a benchmark to measure the strength of the emperor's inheritance. Now, the divine court was the third to cross the threshold. Although Yimo was a demon, there was no doubt that he should be included in the divine court. Originally, Yishuan alone was as stable as Mount Tai. Now there was another Yimo. The divine court could be said to be extremely powerful in the heavens and realms. In the face of all this, Ice Emperor could only sigh. Although he had already given up the idea of competing with Yi Shiwen, seeing that Yimo had also become an emperor, the divine court was even more unshakable. The Ice Palace under his command might not be comparable to the divine court. Only Yimo alone, after becoming an emperor, his profound martial power was not inferior to him, who became an emperor before him. Yimo had paid such a huge price to become an emperor. Naturally, it was impossible for there to be no benefits. In other words, after Yimo became an emperor, he could not keep his title as the second person in the world. How could he be depressed? After Yimo became a martial emperor, it was as if a new era had begun. Everyone fought over each other to undergo their tribulations. However, what happened next caused the hearts of many to turn cold. 10 years after Yimo became an emperor, another person underwent tribulation. During the years of transcending the tribulation, the tree god, who had risen not long ago, transformed into its true body. It was just as some people had guessed. The world tree had gained sentience and cultivated into a tree god. It must be known that the world tree was the source of everything in the legends of many worlds. All worlds were formed on the world tree, like fruits hanging on the world tree. However, it was obvious that the tree goddess was just a world tree that had yet to mature, so it could not form worlds in its body like the legends said. However, even so, it was enough to surprise people. Yi Shiwen had the enlightening-mind ancient tree in his body. According to the ancient legends, it was a descendant of the world tree. It had formed a subspecies. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had always wanted to find a world tree, so that the enlightening-mind ancient tree could advance further. However, he had not been able to find it. Now, one had appeared. It could be said that in terms of bloodline and noble origin, the tree goddess could be said to be one of the few in the world. It was even a level higher than the descendant of the great Kuan Peng. Even if the world tree was not the origin of the world, it was undoubtedly the ancestor of all plant spirits. It was naturally more noble than the great Kuan Peng. Generally, it was difficult for the world tree to form its own consciousness. Just like the heavenly way, the more powerful a plant spirit was, the more difficult it was to form true sentience. Just like the yellow plum, although it was full of spirituality, it did not have its own sentience. However, the tree goddess had formed its own sentience. It was simply one in a million. Obviously, it had its own fortuitous encounter. However, even with such a prominent identity, the tree goddess still failed to cross the tribulations. The body of the world tree was smashed by the heavenly tribulation, and its original spirit was smashed to death. It was impossible for it to survive. The final ending was completed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen, who was far away in the universe, made a move and took away the body of the world tree left behind after the death of the tree goddess. The world tree's body had almost died under the indiscriminate bombardment of the heavens' retribution. It only had a little bit of vitality left. It was on the verge of dying. However, Yi Shiwen had forcibly rescued the world tree. Then he had planted the world tree in the seven-colored living soil. Only such an earth-attribute, innate divine object could revive the world tree. Yi Shiwen placed the body of the world tree into the colorful living soil. For a full 100 years, there was no improvement at all. Even Yi Shiwen was a little desperate. The reason why he made a move was that he did not want the world tree to really become extinct and lose its roots. After all, the probability of such an innate divine object appearing was too low. He had been an emperor for so many years, but he had never found it. Among the divine objects of the plant system, there was almost no existence that could surpass the world tree. It would be a pity if such a divine object were to lose its roots. Even the heavens would cry for it. However, the world tree was seriously damaged under the heavenly tribulation. Even if he personally made a move and carefully maintained it for a full 100 years, it was still useless in the end. The last wisp of vitality still dissipated. However, just when Yi Shiwen was about to give up, he discovered that the wisp of vitality didn't disappear. Instead, it turned into a sapling of the world tree. Under the cultivation of the colorful living soil, this world tree finally survived. Although it was unknown how long it would take for it to grow into a towering tree again, Yi Shiwen was already overjoyed. He was not short of time now. Moreover, this also had unimaginable benefits for the divine court. When the world tree grew up one day in the future, the divine court under the protection of the world tree would have super protection. Even an emperor would not be able to break the barrier of the world tree. The mature world tree was a super existence that was superior to an ordinary emperor. Although it did not have spiritual wisdom, an emperor would not be able to threaten the existence of the world tree. According to the legends passed down by the old people, the world was originally hanging on the world tree. The world tree had infinite branches, and each branch had a world hanging on it. Later, a terrifying existence had split the world tree with a big axe. This had caused the world tree to disappear, and the myriad heavens and myriad worlds had been scattered everywhere. With such a place as the foundation of the divine court, the divine court could be said to be indestructible at this time. Even if the myriad heavens and myriad worlds were destroyed, the divine court would still be safe and sound under the protection of the world tree. One could imagine how tyrannical it was. Although it would take an infinite amount of time for the world tree to grow to such an existence, there was still hope after all. This was the guarantee of the divine court's everlasting existence. In fact, it was even more important than any Tao tool. After Yi Mo, the tree god failed to cross the heavenly tribulation. This was the first case of failure after the confinement period. This also made many people stunned. The previous people had successfully crossed the heavenly tribulation and become emperors. This had made them forget how dangerous it was to become an emperor. Although there were some who succeeded, there were even more who failed. Many people couldn't endure this and died in the end. This sounded the alarm for some people. However, it couldn't stop everyone. In the hundreds of years after the tree god failed to cross the heavenly tribulation, some super existences crossed the heavenly tribulation one after another. Some of them were old antiques that had lived for countless years. There were also some young heaven's pride that had emerged. More than a dozen people had tried to attack the heaven's way in order to cross the heavenly tribulation successfully. However, the final result was that all of them failed without exception. All of them died tragically in the heavenly tribulation. At this time, everyone realized how lucky those people were to succeed one after another. Not everyone could succeed in attacking the Emperor realm. Most of them failed, and the price of failure was death. Only a few people like the tree god were rescued by Yi Shiwen in the end. Moreover, his spirit had been destroyed. Even if the small world tree grew again, it would be impossible for another tree god to appear. Because of this, no one dared to cross the heavenly tribulation for the next 1,000 years. They were completely scared. There were successful cases, but there were more cases of failure and death. During these 1,000 years, Yi Shiwen didn't go into closed-door training. Instead, he traveled everywhere. Firstly, he patrolled the world and suppressed some filthy things that shouldn't appear. Secondly, he searched for the fragments of the demon summoning flag that were scattered everywhere. In the battle that year, the demon summoning flag was smashed into pieces. Yi Shiwen only had one fragment and the spirit of the demon summoning flag. If he wanted to restore the demon summoning flag, he must find the other fragments. It was naturally impossible for others to do it. However, with Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, although he couldn't find them immediately, he still found most of the fragments of the demon summoning flag one after another. As more and more fragments of the beckoning demon flag were found and smelted together, the remaining fragments of the beckoning demon flag became increasingly easier to find. In the 900th year, he found all the scattered fragments of the beckoning demon flag. It took him a full 100 years to refine the beckoning demon flag. At this time, the demons in the demon summoning banner had already completed their transformation. There were countless demons in the Tao-proving realm, and there were hundreds of demons in the Quasi-Emperor realm. Among these demons in the Quasi-Emperor realm, there were 10 demon kings at the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm. At this time, the demon race in the demon summoning flag could be said to have truly recovered to its peak. No, it was even stronger than its peak. After refining the demon summoning flag, Yi Shiwen went to the heavenly court and asked Yi Wudi for the protective formation of the ancient heavenly court, the heavenly cycle star formation. Chapter 3002. The heavenly cycle star formation was a famous top-notch formation among the countless formations that had appeared in the long history of the myriad heavens and realms. It was said that once it was set up, it could compete with an emperor. In the past, when the ancient heavenly court was besieged, it did not fall for many years because of the heavenly cycle star formation. Even the 5 Yuan punishing sky formation, relying on the combat power of 5 peak quasi-emperors, could not stop the NID, who was considered to be at the bottom of the emperor rank. It was conceivable how big the gap between the combat power of a quasi-emperor and an emperor rank was. Using the heavenly cycle star formation could make up for this flaw. However, it was not easy to form the heavenly cycle star formation because it required 900 and 810 quasi-emperors to guard a region. Such a terrifying number of quasi-emperors could only be taken out when the ancient heavenly court was at its peak. In addition, there were 10 incomparably powerful peak quasi-emperor demon kings as the core, and the heavenly cycle star formation was formed. But now, there was not a single force that could take out hundreds of quasi-emperors. After all, quasi-emperors were not cabbages that could be easily found. However, he could use the demon summoning banner as a substitute. In the demon summoning banner, there were many powerful demon kings. Most importantly, in general, to form such a terrifying formation, it was necessary to transfer experts from all sides. It might be possible to use it for a decisive battle, but it was not enough to use it for protection during ordinary times. Because those quasi-emperors could be said to be of high status and power, and it was reasonable for them to obey orders during a battle. However, it was impossible to transform them into a formation during ordinary times, and it was also a great waste of manpower. But with the demon summoning banner as the core, it was completely different. The demon summoning banner could guard the center of the divine court for a long time. Once it was needed, it could be activated at any time, and the demon kings in the demon summoning banner could also form a formation at any time and form the heavenly cycle star formation. At that time, the defense of the divine court would be truly impregnable. Such a huge lineup of quasi-emperors naturally did not appear out of thin air, but Yi Shiwen had fed the flesh and blood of several emperor rank experts to feed these demon kings. Otherwise, it would not be so simple. Since ancient times, no one could be as extravagant as Yi Shiwen. There was no need to mention the relationship between Yi Shiwen and Yi Wudi. Moreover, although he had the heavenly cycle star formation, the ancient heavenly court was no longer at its peak strength when it ruled the world. It was impossible to gather so many demon race quasi-emperors. It might be possible to reduce the scale by 10 times, but the power of the heavenly cycle star formation would be greatly reduced in that case. Without any hesitation, he handed over the diagram to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen went to the ancient heavenly court. Yi Wudi also told him a piece of news. Within 1,000 years, he and young Kuan-Pong would try to break through to the emperor level. Both of their skills could be said to be excellent, and they were the best among the peak quasi-emperors. They were only half a step away from the emperor level. In addition, they both had Taoist tools to protect them. It could be said that they were well prepared. If they did not break through now, they would not have any more confidence even after tens of thousands of years. In that case, why not just break through directly? Of course, both of them were Yi Shiwen's brothers. When they crossed the tribulation, Yi Shiwen would still protect them. However, Yi Shiwen could only protect them. Whether they could succeed or not, it would ultimately depend on themselves. With his protection, the success rate would be much higher than the average person. In this regard, Yi Shiwen only left a sentence: "I will wait for you to become emperors." There are still important things to discuss. After getting the heavenly cycle star formation, Yi Shiwen returned to the divine court and began to set up the formation. However, this was not as simple as setting up the formation. He also wanted to rebuild the foundation of the divine court. All along, the divine court had been expanding with the hidden valley as the core. This might have been suitable when Yi Shiwen had not become an emperor, but now, it seemed a little insufficient. Yi Shiwen used a portion of the rainbow living soil as the core and accelerated the growth of the rainbow living soil to the extreme, forming a huge world called the Martial Emperor Heaven. In the center of the Martial Emperor Heaven was the seedling of the world tree. It took root in the rainbow living soil, absorbing the energy of the rainbow living soil to grow. This Martial Emperor Heaven was not a divine kingdom, but a real world. He had obtained inspiration from the battle with Emperor Hunyuan. He wanted to create a real world, not just a divine kingdom. As long as the master of a divine kingdom was still alive, the divine kingdom would be full of vitality. All the rules were based on the will of the master of the divine kingdom. Once the master of the divine kingdom died, the divine kingdom would also fall apart. However, the creation of heaven and earth was completely different. All the rules had to be completed so that the heavenly way could circulate and operate continuously. It was no different from the real world. Even if Yi Shiwen died one day, this world would not fall with him. There was another advantage of the creation of heaven and earth. Because the entire small world was in line with the outside world, the Great Way was also complete. With the operation of the heavenly way, it would slowly grow into a real world. During this process, Yi Shiwen, who was connected with the entire small world, could constantly comprehend the true meaning of the Great Way. And these comprehensions could also promote Yi Shiwen to continuously improve his strength and realm. Moreover, Yi Shiwen could also use the power of this world to fight. It could be said that there were many benefits. This was a path that Yi Shiwen had never thought of. This was because at his level of cultivation, every step he took forward had to depend on himself. There was no model for him to follow. Among the many sovereign emperors, there were differences in strength. However, in terms of the great Tao, they had already reached the peak. Who was weaker than the other? They could only learn from each other. However, this was an extremely huge project. It was not an easy task to make the heavenly way in the small world operate on its own. Even with Yi Shiwen's current cultivation level, it would require a lot of energy. He vaguely realized that this might be a path, a way to achieve the ultimate great way. However, it should not be something that he could grasp at his realm level. It was just that he had used the rainbow living soil to forcibly open up such a small world. Before the small heavenly way could form a cycle, Yi Shiwen had to stay in this small world and preside over the operation of the Great Way. Yi Shiwen also used his great magic power to grab the divine court and forcibly placed it beside Wu Tian, forming a protective formation. This way, the backup plan that Yi Shiwen had left behind for the divine court could be considered to have taken shape. It could ensure the stability of divine court for countless years in the future. In divine court, although Yi Shiwen did not show his face, such a big matter as the entire divine court's relocation still attracted the attention of all the realms. Besides Yi Shiwen, even Yi Mo, who had just become an emperor, could not do such a thing. Moreover, Yi Mo, who had just become an emperor, was still in seclusion to consolidate his cultivation. This was also something that everyone knew. Very soon, everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was splitting the heavens and the earth apart. When they found out that Yi Shiwen had done this, many people could not help but fall silent. This was because they knew very well what a magnificent feat and miracle it was to split the heavens and the earth apart. It was simply like a miracle. Even in the past, they had not heard of anyone splitting the heavens and the earth apart. However, ever since this martial emperor had ascended to the throne, he had created too many miracles. It did not seem impossible for him to do another earth-shattering thing. And all this made the peak quasi-emperors, who had already touched the edge, even more anxious. They had not become emperors yet, but Yi Shiwen was already splitting the heavens and the earth apart. They were originally people in the same realm, but now they had been left so far behind. Although they did not dare to hope to fight against Yi Shiwen now, they did not want to be left behind by Yi Shiwen either. After this series of failures, finally, someone bravely took the first step. As the master of divine court, Yi Wudi stood up and challenged the emperor, Lord Heavenly Tribulation. He also invited everyone in the world to come and watch the Heavenly Tribulation. Many people heard this news and moved immediately, gathering outside the divine court. Yi Wudi's figure was above the divine court. All kinds of protective formations in the divine court were also activated. After all, there used to be many emperor lords here. So even if he directly went through the heavenly tribulation here, there was no need to worry that the ancient divine court would be destroyed. In the eyes of many people, especially those who also came from the emperor lord's inheritance, it was not only whether he became an emperor or not, but also whether they became emperors or not. This was because in the world, except for the emperor clan, Ji family, there had never been an example of an emperor being born among the descendants of an emperor lord. There were many emperor lords in the ancient divine court, but they were all people of the same generation. They were not the descendants of anyone, so they did not count. The relationship between Yi Mo and Yi Shiwen was the same, so they were not considered successful examples. For example, the Dragon Island and the ancient Phoenix realm were extremely glorious. However, they couldn't break away from this law. It was like a curse that firmly suppressed everyone. In the past, no matter how outstanding the people had been, they had all failed their tribulations in the end. It was like those sovereign emperors had absorbed the luck of an entire race or sect by themselves. As a result, there could no longer be another sovereign emperor among their descendants. Could Yi Wudi break this curse? Many people were waiting to see. The Lord of the Heavenly Court is going through a tribulation. There's no reason for a martial emperor not to come and protect him. Someone looked left and right, but didn't see Yi Shiwen's figure, so they couldn't help but ask. That's hard to say. Everyone knows that the martial emperor is creating the world. How could he have the energy to protect Yi Wudi? It's hard to say. After all, the martial emperor's cultivation is too profound and his realm is far beyond what we can imagine. Maybe he has a way to do it. For a moment, everyone was discussing spiritedly. Suddenly, a figure materialized in the sky and walked over step by step. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.